Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City Council meeting. If you'd please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our Statement of Values. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Neill. Please be seated. A roll call, City Clerk, and Statement of Values.
Thank you. Councilmember Mahan. O'Neill.
Here.
Davis. Here. Watanabe. Kolstad.
Here.
And Mayor Gilmore.
Here.
And if I may please
Yes.
read the AB 23 announcement that members of the Santa Clara Stadium Authority, Sports and Open Space Authority, and Housing Authority are entitled to receive $30 for each attended meeting, and the Statement of Behavioral Standards. The City of Santa Clara has adopted a code of ethics and values and behavioral standards for public meetings to promote and maintain the highest levels of conduct. This includes mutual respect, robust discussion, and allowing city business to be done in an efficient and consistent manner. Please note that as the presiding officer, the mayor's direction in matters of process and decorum should be followed, and that use of the gavel indicates all conversations must conclude and everyone in attendance should come to order and attention. Welcome, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you, City Clerk. So next we have reports of action taken in closed session. City Attorney.
The City Council did authorize the City Manager to make an offer on a piece of property. The terms of that offer will become public when the offer becomes public.
Okay, so we don't take any action. You're just reporting out.
Later on the agenda, you will be taking action on that.
Okay, thank you, City Attorney. Next, continuances and exceptions. Is there any? I don't have any, so seeing none. Any from the public? All right, seeing no continuances or exceptions, we're going to go to our first special order of business, and it's recognition of our outgoing Youth Commission members. And I'd like to ask John Kawada if he'd like to come forward to introduce our outgoing Youth Commissioners. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Gilmore, City Council members, City Manager, and City staff present tonight. I'm John Kawada, the Staff Liaison to the Youth Commission. It is with pleasure this evening to recognize 7 outgoing Youth Commissioners this evening. We will miss these commissioners as they move forward to continuing their educations, and we hope they will come and visit us at the pizza booth at the Art and Wine Festival in September. So our first commissioner is Nithyashri Bhaskaran, who is a senior at St. Francis High School and has served 3 terms. Unfortunately, she could not be here tonight. Iko Iben is a senior at Cupertino High School and has served 2 terms. Iko, come on up. Ahmed Iftikhar is a senior at Wilcox High School and has served 2 terms. Alicia Luong is a senior at Santa Clara High School, has served 3 terms, and is our chair.
Wow.
Jill Mangawang is a senior at Mission Early College High School and has served 1 term. Piper Olson is a senior at Santa Clara High School and has served 2 terms.
Piper.
And finally, Catherine Peterson is a senior at Archbishop Mitty and has served 3 terms. And we would like to thank you all very much for your service to the Santa Clara community, and we'd also like to invite mayor and council members down for a photo.
Yes, thank you.
Act like you know each other. Come on. Sure. Certainly.
Hello, I'm Jill Mangawang, and I will be attending UC Santa Cruz.
Hi, I'm Catherine Peterson. I'll be attending Barnard College.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Piper Olson, and I'll be attending Brigham Young University, Idaho.
Nice.
Hello, I'm Alicia Lung, and I'm going to De Anza College with the intention to transfer after 1 year.
Yay.
Hello, I am Iko Even. I will be playing baseball as a recruit for De Anza College.
Nice. Whoa.
Hi, I'm Ahmed Iftikhar, and I'll be attending UCLA.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of all of you. Thank you so much for your service as youth commissioners. You did an outstanding job. Thank you. Good luck. Yay. Good luck in college. What? Oh. And John, if you make sure the youth commissioner that wasn't here is able to get her things. Okay, so next we have appointment of the Youth Commission for 2018-19 term. There you go, John, now.
All right, so we have to fill those 7 vacancies.
Yes, exactly. Big shoes to fill.
And so on March 24th, 25 candidates were interviewed for 7 Youth Commission vacancies for the 2018-19 term. The candidates that staff forwarded to City Council for recommendations or for the appointments are Yusra Arub, a senior at Archbishop Mitty High School. Come on down.
Yeah, if you could come forward, please.
Jasmine Kelly Tanti, an 8th grader who will be an 8th grader at Cabrillo Middle School. Vincent Close, who will be a junior at Wilcox High School.
Oh, what's that?
Adrian Krivokopik Zhu, who will be a sophomore at Santa Clara High School.
Nice.
Sia Sharma, a junior who will be a junior at St. Francis High School. Smriti Suresh, who will be a sophomore at Wilcox High School.
Nice.
And Natasha Yin, who will be a sophomore at the Harker School.
Nice. Is this all the candidates?
This is.
Great, congratulations. I see some brothers and sisters of some previous youth commissioners, so it's nice to see that they had very positive experiences and they're recommending it to their siblings. So thank you all. You have a lot of work ahead of you, and we're so proud that you're joining our youth commission in Santa Clara. And we'd love to take a picture with you if you wouldn't mind coming up here, and we'll join you down there.
They're for the next special order of business.
Okay, so why don't we make it official? Could I please have a motion to?
Motion to approve the new youth commissioners.
Second.
So motion second for appointment. Jennifer? Okay, please register your vote. Let's hope this passes. Oh, 6-0. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Okay, next. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Gilmore, City Council members, City Manager, City staff present tonight. I'm Alicia Leung, the Chair of the Youth Commission. This year, Youth Commission is proud to sponsor a community service scholarship in an effort to recognize youth who have made a commitment to service. This year, the Youth Commission would like to present Rafael Tolosa, a senior at Wilcox High School, a $750 scholarship for his continued service to the Santa Clara community.
Wow.
Caroline Close, the Youth Commission Vice Chair and Scholarship Committee member, and I are here to present Rafael with his check. Thank you, Rafael, for your service. And I would please like to invite the mayor and council to take a photo with Rafael and us.
Okay. This is how we get our exercise all day.
Hi, my name is Rafael, and I'm going to UC Berkeley this fall.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that'll help towards your tuition and books. Thank you for that scholarship. Okay, next we have the presentation of awards for the Santa Clara Sculpture Exhibition, Out of the Darkness, Light. So, okay, as a special order of business, we're announcing the winners of this year's Santa Clara Sculpture Exhibition. The city's 8th biennial sculpture, I'm having a hard time with that word, exhibition opened to the public on April 9th and will run through June 15th. The theme for this year's exhibition was Out of the Darkness, Light. There was a total of 46 submissions by artists throughout the Bay Area. 22 semifinalists were selected to display at City Hall and Central Park Library. The artwork is also viewable on the Cultural Commission's Facebook page. The following judging panel selected 3 sculptures for recognition. First, we had Councilmember Debbie Davis, Cultural Commissioner Deborah Von Hune. Is Deborah here? Oh, there she is, Deborah. The Triton Museum's Deputy Director Preston Metcalf. Preston here? I don't see him. And City Librarian Hillary Keith. Hillary? No. So I guess Debbie and Debbie. So I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Davis, and she'll give us a presentation and announce the winners for us.
And I promise not to massacre your names. Okay, this was an excellent show, and do we third to the first, or you want to go first to the last? First to the last. Okay. The winner is first place, Pixel the Universe. And congratulate artist Chris Constantine. Chris, are you here? Yeah. Come on up.
Do we have a picture of that? A slide?
Advance the slide with the picture.
Is there a picture? Ooh.
Whoa, back up, back up. Back up. It's the first one. The back. The first one.
Oh,
That's the
that's,
last one.
oh, oh.
Got it.
Yay. That's beautiful.
Okay, congratulations, and Debbie has a check. Congratulations.
In the West Wing of City
Okay.
Hall.
Please visit his art. It's spectacular, and thank you. So the first place winner is Chris, as you just met, and the Pixel, the universe, is a cube of 512 full-color LED lights in a clear case. It is currently on display in the West Wing because we want to make sure that you see this. Chris has not previously exhibited his art in a juried show, but frequent participant in the Burning Man Festival, and has developed his art that features the environment. Congratulations, Chris. Thank you. Second place belongs to Boundless Landscapes. Congratulate Jeffrey Yip. Is Jeffrey here?
Jeffrey.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And she has the check for doing this program. It hasn't been a while, but we're back. So let me talk about your artwork. The second place winner of the sculpture exhibition, Boundless Landscape, a motion graphic projection mapped on a 16-grid pyramidal display. Oh, this is horrible. It is on display at Central Park Library. Also a Burning Man participant, Jeffrey has displayed his art for many years in the public realm, including Lights Out on Pier 70 in San Francisco, East Bay Maker Fair, and the third international exhibition of new art in the CICA Museum in Gimpo, South Korea. Congratulations, Jeffrey. And we don't have her. She's not here. Okay, and the third winner, about honorable mention sculpture, Metaphysic Cosmology.
That's a long name.
Oh gosh. Origin of the Universe, Fundamental Nature of Being. And that's Dottie Shagan, who unfortunately cannot attend. The honorable mention for the sculpture exhibit goes to Dottie. I'm not going to say that again. The artwork is in a plexiglass half dome of constellations, which interactive displays a video of the cosmos and incorporates fiber optic strands. It is on display at Central Park Library. Dottie also has another sculpture titled Building Blocks, which is right outside the council chambers. Dottie has an esteemed CV, which includes international shows in the US, Hungary, Finland, and Canada, as well as the Santa Clara's own Triton Museum of Art. She has been granted an artist registry in Finland in 2019. So I wish to thank all of you for participating. We hope that when this goes again that we'll have more. We had 43 applicants and you guys won. And thank you so much for displaying your art. That's what we want here. And we're hoping that everybody's gonna go in the West Wing, the East Wing, and Central Park Library. So thank you for coming.
Congratulations. And thank you to both of you for agreeing to judge this event as well. Yes, if they could come forward. And I think if you can come up here and we'll meet you down there. I think there's a theme here about Burning Man art. And I know that that is really phenomenal. There's a lot of Burning Man art that's being displayed in the city of San Jose. And we're looking at ways we may be able to exhibit Burning Man art in Santa Clara. So thank you. Okay. Next order of business is our consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are approved with one motion unless an item is pulled for discussion.
Mayor, I'd like
And
to pull an item.
I know item 2I has been pulled by a member of the public. Did you also want to pull that item?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis? So 2I. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think I need to abstain on 2E. I don't know if my office is within 500 feet of Main Street. It's Main near Benton. So out of an abundance of caution, I'll just abstain on 2E.
And I think Councilmember Mahan has to as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so noting my abstention then on 2E, because I think it's just right around the corner from my house.
Okay, so do you have those two abstentions? Thank you.
Motion to approve the balance of the
Wait
consent.
1 second. Is there any other members of the council that would want to pull any item? Jennifer, are there any cards for members of the public besides the 2I? Is there any member of the public wanting to pull an item on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, there's a motion.
Motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar.
Motion second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Wait, okay. Moves us right along here. Wow, gone far. Okay, public presentations. Jennifer? Okay, let's go to public presentations here. It's still on the consent calendar. All right, here we go. So I have Ali Sarasak. If you'd like to come forward, please. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. In an NPR article published today, Ranju Das, director of Amazon's real-time facial recognition technology, was quoted as saying, "The city of Orlando is a launch partner of ours. They have cameras all over the city. The authorized cameras are then streaming the data. We are a subscriber to the stream. We analyze the video in real time, search against the collection of faces they have." In the video presentation, Daz is seen saying the system can be set up to notify the city if cameras see a person of interest, and it could be used to reconstruct a person's past movements. He showed the conference a demo of real-time facial recognition using video from a traffic cam that was provided by the city of Orlando. Matt Cagle of the ACLU said Amazon is handing governments a surveillance system primed for abuse, and that's why we're blowing the whistle right now. And I stand here before this city council to also blow the whistle on the coming surveillance state. The article goes on to say that California has taken an interest in this technology. We like to think our government is benevolent. However, during World War II, the federal government rounded up over 100,000 Japanese Americans and put them in prison camps. In 1993, the federal government descended on a family property in Waco, Texas, with tanks, snipers, helicopters, and hundreds of federal troops. 82 innocent men, women, and children were slaughtered, with some being shot, but most burned alive inside their homes. According to traffic engineer Dennis Ng, Santa Clara has 39 surveillance cameras installed at traffic intersections throughout the city. How do you think we feel knowing that our government is creating a system that can recreate the past movements of our sons and daughters who may become a person of interest for being a political activist? What steps is the city taking to end this dystopian and Orwellian world?
Thank you. Do we have any comment to that, city manager? I know public presentations, we don't take any action on anything, but a description of what our cameras do. I know they're traffic cameras, but
I would invite one of our directors. Our Public Works Director, and I don't know if perhaps the chief may want to add additional comment, but we'll.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Craig Mobeck, Director of Public Works. Yes, we do have cameras at several of the intersections, and what we do is we take that information and we're able to control the signals and make traffic flow more efficient in various intersections. So in our transportation division, we have on the wall the screens of TVs that some of you might have seen, and that broadcasts the view of those intersections, and we're able to adapt the signals.
Are we using any sort of facial recognition or any of that technology?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, and thank you to the speaker for bringing this to our attention, of course. Yes, sir. Did you have something else? Because I don't want it to be a give and take. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. But at this point, all we have is traffic cameras. And aren't these cameras... isn't it visible online in terms of watching for traffic? I know around our stadium you can actually go online and see real-time traffic in the city's website. Isn't
my
that?
understanding, the stadium ones are.
The stadium ones are, but not through the rest of the city?
That's correct.
So anybody can access them at any time?
On the stadium ones, yes.
Thank you, and thank you for the heads up on
Thank
this. We'll keep a close eye on everything. Thank you. Any other public presentations? Please come forward. Welcome.
Hassam Hagag here. Last week we heard quite a bit of really moving testimony. And it didn't occur to me at the time, but later in the week, one of the very powerful pieces of testimony that was read here on the dais was republished as a letter to the Santa Clara News Online. And in that testimony, when I read it a second time, something stood out to me that I hadn't really considered or thought about when it was given here live, because of obviously our thoughts were on something else. But I want to read from you a quote from that letter, and it was written by Tamara. And in there is a paragraph in which she says, when he did decide to show up to class and teach us, he would often make work phone calls from class and badmouth the city council. He'd tell us how useless and slow his fellow council members were, how hard it was for him being one of the youngest council members. And here's the kicker. He would also brag on numerous occasions about how happy he was to have been a lobbyist for the 49ers, that thanks to them, he had a Mercedes and a comfortable life. You know, for a long while, we've suspected that council members were doing the bidding of the 49ers and not out of the kindness of their hearts. What was once just whispers is now turning into a mumble, and maybe Tamara didn't realize this, but with the powerful statement she read last week, that mumble is likely to turn into a roar. And just like we've taken the claims of sexual harassment seriously, we also need to take seriously the claims of corruption and bribery. I'd like this to serve as a formal request to our city attorney to direct investigation, either by your office or by the district attorney's office, into the financial records of former council member Dominic Caserta for any contributions made by the 49ers that were not reported on his official documents. You know, back in 2016, when I was doing council candidate interviews, many people approached me both anonymously and openly with information about other candidates and prior council races. And in my naivete, I was shocked to learn that in the past, candidates for council were approached by members of the 49ers organization with monetary offers in exchange for dropping out of their council race. And it's because of this, with the news shared last week, that I also want the investigation to look into any monies the 49ers have given to council members Patty Mahan, Pat Kolstad, former Mayor Jamie Matthews, and the late council member Jerry Marsali. Sometimes all it takes is for there to be a spark, and that lights a forest fire. And I think what we heard last week was the spark, and I'm urging and asking that justice be done and that we really take these allegations of corruption and bribery seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, we can't take any comments.
Yes, but Mayor Gilmore, I have a comment in response to that.
Councilmember Mahan.
I'll state right here, so you don't have to bother with an investigation, Mr. Hagag. In my first run for mayor in the city of Santa Clara, I received a $500 campaign contribution from Dr. John York. I received a $500 campaign contribution from Larry McNeil. In October 2011, I don't remember the exact date, I got a free ticket as one of 200 guests who were breast cancer survivors because that was the year that I was first diagnosed with breast cancer. I didn't get anything other than what everybody else got, a pink t-shirt, and I was not invited as a council member, but as a breast cancer survivor. That is all I have ever received from the 49ers, and you can investigate it all you wish.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Tino Silva. Last week I spoke during the presentations of some of the students, and I didn't realize that there was going to be additional speakers to come forward after. So what I wanted to share with the council is to say, needless to say, we're in an unprecedented time in our city's history. Our last city council meeting was unlike any other, as women who were harassed and abused by former council members and a school teacher stepped forward to tell their story. I believe those brave young women were speaking not just for themselves, but for every other woman who's been the victim of harassment over the past 16 years, both at Santa Clara High School and within the city itself. The purpose of providing these women a forum to speak was to empower them to have their voice heard for all to hear. However, it saddened me that despite the sensitive nature of the discussion, individuals and organizations manipulated that platform of healing to further their own agendas. As a supporter of Measure A, I'm a firm believer a new election system in Santa Clara is long overdue. However, there's a time and a place to argue one's point of view on Measure A, and that was not the time. A council member and others who ran unsuccessfully for office in the previous campaigns used this moment to shine the spotlight on themselves, and it was wrong. I hope moving forward, we remember that the privilege to speak on sensitive topics like harassment is not an open invitation to criticize our council.
Thank you. Any other public presentations? Please come forward. Welcome.
Just wanted to make the point that I just don't think that somebody who repeatedly uses the victim stories and the women coming up here and speaking and sharing everything they've gone through and their victimization and their terror, I don't think somebody who uses that is a credible person. I don't think they're an honorable person. I think they're an idiot. I think they're a jackass. I think they're self-serving. And I think it's the ultimate audacity of any man to get up here and try and use the victimization of women to further their own political goals. And if it happens next week, we're going to talk outside.
Thank you. Any others? Sure? Okay. Thank you all for those public presentations. All right, next we have the consent items pulled for discussion, and we have one consent item, and that was item about the trees. It was...
No, you had 2E that you have to abstain from.
We don't discuss that. So it's 2I, action on citywide tree service agreement. So we had a member of the audience that pulled that, as well as Councilmember Davis. So if you'd like to come forward, member of the audience that pulled that, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm Jason Pinniger. I'm with West Coast Arborists. We're a tree maintenance firm. We are family owned. We are customer service oriented, and we specialize in municipal contracts only. We service 250 cities throughout the state of California. We're the only signatory company, and we are with Labor's Union or LIUNA. We have 120 laborers in the Bay Area. Our regional office is based right here in the city of Santa Clara at 390 Martin Avenue. We've been there for 6 years. With the local office, we believe WCA is more able to respond to emergencies, priorities, and resident requests. With our union-based employees, we have a superior safety record, which is reflected through our experience modification, through the Compensation Insurance Rating Bureau. The 2018 tree results appear that West Coast Arborist is the lowest bidder overall or over average, but we've been only selected to provide emergency tree maintenance services and planting, which is less than 10% of the contract overall. So that I would request that the city take for consideration to issue all line items to all contractors so that we can perform the work evenly, to allocate equal amounts to contractors rather than putting limits, and or to rebid the RFP because it was not made clear that we would be breaking up the contract to 4 different vendors. So I think that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you for consideration.
So can I ask you a question? So you bid on,
It's West Coast Arborist.
so you're okay, so you're West Coast
Arborist.
and you're local, that's great. You bid on all, did you bid on all? I don't understand how the bidding happened.
I
I'm a little
actually have
confused.
the average prices here if you'd like to see them.
Maybe city manager?
We'll have the director at the appropriate time. I think this item has been provide that presentation.
Okay, thank
So
you.
we can just
Maybe,
receive
thank
comments
you
and-
for those, just stay put though, or stay close. And then we'll have Councilmember Davis ask her questions and then ask our director to come forward and talk about it. Thank you, Jason. Yes, is this for the same item?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Olivia Navarro. I represent the more than 6,000 members in Santa Clara County, some of which are West Coast Arborist employees. So today I come before you asking you to review and possibly either one, review it for and advertise it for additional bids. West Coast Arborist has been really good to Santa Clara, the city of Santa Clara. Like the previous speaker before me, they are local, and we're always talking about local hire, how much more. This is perfect. They're local hire, they have families here, and they've been servicing the city of Santa Clara for the past 7 years. As a matter of fact, $345,167 is the total amount of work that they've done since they started. It's amazing to me that even though there's an opportunity to gain, there's a person that's in charge of this company that's able to give back to the community so much. A lot of our members that are employed there are really happy with them. This is the only employer that I know of that is a union employer, and that's why we support them for obvious reasons. But besides that, more than anything, this is the only employer that I know is providing medical for all the family, not just for the employer. They're not paying into it. They're actually taking care of the whole family. So I ask you to support the families that are working here in the city of Santa Clara. They're servicing in their own neighborhoods, and what more pride can you have than that? I know that there's a question about the bids and how the other bids came through, and you're going to be discussing that with the city manager. However, I will just I want to make sure I stress this more than anything. We need to make sure we have good contractors that have good, skilled, trained, and certified, that they invest in their employees. And that means they're also investing in our city and giving back. Let's review this. I beg of you. If you can please review the West Coast Arborist contract. And if you can include it so it reviews, it also includes a tree trimming and removal service. They've been doing this work for the city of Santa Clara for some time now. I'm not sure that they've done anything wrong to not continue to provide the services that they have been. The other option that we can also be okay with is to allocate an equal contract amount for all 4 companies that bid on this project. And then finally, if you can't come to a consensus, if you can put it out so they can bid on it again and they can get a fair share. Like I said, they're not a bad apple. We want to make sure we support the people that are actually taking care of our own community. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for that information. Councilmember Davis?
Okay, yeah, I have tree issues, and that's why I pulled this, because we have all these different tree companies. I wanted to get one cohesive tree company to do the job. I understand that we have Public Works, we have Silicon Valley Power, but as I was reading this, it's broken down into various contracts. So some are arborists, some are cleanup removal, some are this, some are that. So I kind of agree with what's going on here. I always thought that to streamline what we have in the city is to make sure that if all of these entities within our departments can come to a consensus of one person versus all these breakdowns of who's going to show up, who's not going to show up. I was a victim of a tree dropping on my car. So, and now I was told that the arborist hadn't been out there in a while, and I don't want it to happen to anyone else in our city because it's a hazard. So I really would like to have some kind of, I know, I think, Craig, you're going to talk about this, but I would really like to see this just one cohesive plan and not kind of like all over the place. And he did bring up some good facts. I mean, I think that maybe we should put it out to rebid and look at how we're going to do this in the future and combine the companies, or no, sorry, the department heads with a company and give them full direction as to what their responsibilities are going to be. So that's why I've always had an issue with this, why we have all these separate contracts, people that are coming in. We had Davy Tree at one time. So we have, I'm seeing different numbers or people here. So I'm just curious as to, can we do this? Can we send this back and take a serious look at this? So that is my question, City Manager.
Thank you, City Manager.
I'd like for the Director of Public Works to provide the context before we make a decision or I comment on your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Craig Mobeck, Director of Public Works. So the reason why that contract was split up the way it was and the RFP was clear that we could award it in such a way was actually for a couple reasons. One, to provide the best cost to the city of Santa Clara. So we were able to identify certain tree companies to take care of certain tree species, as well as some tree removals and emergency removals as well. And so we were able to get a better cost through that path, and we're also able to take care of more trees in doing it that way. The second reason is because of the fact that if we do call someone out for emergency and they can't get to it, we do have a backup to call. So that is another reason to have multiple resources to be able to call in for any one of those tree services.
Could you tell us how the bidding process worked? Was it an actual bidding process?
So it was an RFP that was put out, and so cost was a component of it. And so we looked at a number of things, but we were comfortable with the firms that submitted, and we took a look at the costs and looked at the trees. Some of them varied quite a bit from species, and so that's the way we looked at it and awarded it, and recommending the award in such a way. And staff's comfortable with managing those companies as well to take care of the work.
Do we give any, for lack of a better term, extra points to businesses that are located in Santa Clara in our community? And how do we look at that? Because we always try to hire locally.
Sure, there is a local policy, and I believe it's a 1% reduction in cost, but even when we looked at that and applied that, the firm would not be the lowest.
And has this firm done, it sounds like they have had a larger contract with the city from before.
West
for many
Coast.
years. West Coast.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And so now they were just awarded, or they're recommended to be awarded just a small portion,
Smaller piece
just
of
the
it.
emergency.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Davis.
Okay, so I guess my thinking is this is already in the budget for this year?
We have funding in the budget, yes.
Is there any way that we can re-look at this for next year? If we award this and approve this now, how can we make this a little bit more streamlined? Because I also saw that people are tree planting. So I'm curious as to the expertise that, you know, I mean, this is your job. I'm just going with what I've seen out there, and a lot of people are complaining. We had, I think, an 80-year-old woman. She had the same issue. They said it's not a city tree, it is a city tree. So there's like back and forth, and I think our residents need to understand where we are going with this. I understand Silicon Valley Power, they go and do the heavy lifting like in our creek beds and stuff when they're putting up new poles. But just for the local everyday stuff, we're Tree City USA, and I'm kind of like wondering, we had 4 years of a drought, and some of these trees are in really bad condition, and I don't know how we can help the people that have had issues before. So I just really would like to look at this in some streamlining fashion to help us. And I understand what you're saying. You did the bids, you got the money correct. I mean, we're in the budget, but I still would like to get to one company, even if it is in Santa Clara and is the backup. But what if there is another backup somewhere that's just a little closer? I mean, I'm just looking at this holistically.
I'm wondering if we could send this back to staff and ask them to relook at that, because I really think, I know we all like to hire locally, and if we have firms that are, consistent and, reliable, and they treat their workers well, and all these things, it sounds like this was an RFP and not a bid, so.
I want to offer 2 points, and the first is that we need to make sure that we have these services available, especially for the emergency conditions. And to the extent that we don't get approval, I would want to hear from the director in terms of what happens if a tree does fall and are the services in place. That is first and foremost the concern that we need to have answered in place. The second is, if you look at the second recommendation, it's a cumulative amount, and we're asking for authority. I think with your comments, we can go back, look at the proposals, and see if there's a different way to achieve the council's goal on distributing the dollars based on local interest, and bring that back either through the blog or through, I can announce next week, what the final cash value determinations were for the contract award. But I think it is important to, and that's what the authority says under the second amount, is just to stay within that, the value, the cumulative total, but to make sure that we don't exceed it. And I think we can just relook at the proposals and see what additional changes and work with the vendor so that we have a better solution that meets
And no interruption in service, right?
And no interruption in
Yes, that's
service.
important, right.
Okay, I'm good with that.
So I've answered your question, Councilmember Davis.
Yes, I am good with that. So that if this can go back and then bring it back to us so that we have a better understanding.
Make the motion, please.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to refer this back to staff and reallocate that $704,000 for this thing.
Second.
It's more than 704,000.
It's 2,113. It's a cumulative amount. And
2,113,000.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
And just so I can get some clarification, so look at awarding to one company, is that what I'm hearing?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. The reallocating the money through the different vendors that you have already on here.
And I'm hearing with a particular interest in a local
hires.
Right.
Acknowledging our local vendors.
Okay, that's a motion. Is there a second?
Kathy was a second.
Point of clarification, Your Honor.
Yes.
Are we giving direction to reallocate or just to look at reallocation?
I think it was to refer back to the city manager.
Just to refer it back, okay.
Right, yes.
As long as it's just referring back and then they can report back to us.
So
All
we
right,
will come back and we will represent numbers and have this item heard next week.
Thank you. Councilmember Kolstad, you have a question?
I want to make
comment?
sure, though, are there any issues? Because if not, I would ask for you to approve it and let me verbally report out on public safety with respect to our emergency tree contracts.
Well, I mean, right now, funding, we don't have any more funding this fiscal year. And so that is one of the things we do want to get this awarded. So we have contractors on board to start working on the trees. But we have all the information in the RFP, all the costs are there. So
if there's an emergency between now and next Tuesday, we're okay, right?
If there's an emergency, yes, we have some set aside to take care of that. But in terms of the actual trimming and pruning on our regular maintenance schedule, we're not doing that right now because we don't have a contract with money in it.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councilmember Kolstad and then Councilmember O'Neill.
Just wanted to be clear that staff will not be limited by looking for one vendor, that they will be looking at all of the aspects of providing timely, efficient service and getting it done right away, having backup, all of those things.
The motion doesn't limit to one vendor. Councilmember O'Neill?
Yes, so in my recollection of some of the prior discussions about the tree contracts was that one of the interests from some of the council members was that if there was, if the awards were aggregated, that there maybe was going to be like a volume discount or some lower price. So it doesn't look like, I'm not sure what the methodology in terms of the awarding. So was that, and I understand, having worked on supply chain agreements in my past, I understand about the need to have multiple sources So what was kind of the thinking? It wasn't so much, like I said, I think originally we thought, oh, we're going to save a lot of money if you give the award to, you know, one vendor or possibly with a backup. But it looks like you were looking at specific skill sets and the pricing based on the specific services. So it wasn't looking at if by pooling them that we would get lower prices.
Yeah, correct. When we looked at the proposals, that we felt there was 4 good firms out there, and so we were comfortable with them. And then we looked at the pricing. There was some differentials between species. We saw an opportunity to come in at a lower cost. That's why we came with the scenario to split things up. Certainly, we can go back and look at you know, what would have been the, you know, who would have been awarded to for completely lowest going to one company, as well as if there's other ways through that process, we can look at divvying it up. We can work with the attorney's office to see what we can do with that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the floor to refer back to city manager. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So then going back to our regular agenda, we have a public hearing general business. The first is a written petition received by Vivek Khandelwal, opposition to proposed traffic lights at the intersection of Prune Ridge and Cronin. Please come forward. I know you've come to the last couple of meetings and this item has been deferred, and I apologize for that. So you're finally here.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
I think there were more important pressing issues than this one.
No, thank you.
I actually stand here representing the neighbors. So these are all the residents around the Prune Ridge and Cronin intersection. We have all submitted a letter also, which I have submitted to the city. There have been some discussions with the city engineer, traffic engineer. The discussions have been unsatisfactory, and we have responded to the emails that we received from documenting our discussions from the engineer as well. So, and I'm going to use the word we here because I'm representing about 6-7 residents all around this intersection. So we actually support, and we are very glad that the city is doing something about this intersection. It's just that we feel that this proposal as it is right now in the current incarnation is not addressing all the issues. And we hope that this could be an opportunity to fix more things than what we are trying to fix and achieve a whole lot more. This is a picture just to explain what's going on at this intersection. This is the Prune Ridge and Cronin comes in between Pomeroy and Woodhams, which is on this section of Prune Ridge Avenue that connects Lawrence and San Tomas. And this intersection is very close to the Maywood Park for those of you who know that area. What's happening here is that this is a 4-lane road from San Tomas that suddenly becomes a 2-lane road at Pomeroy. And that is actually, in our opinion, the residents who are filing this petition, is one of the key reasons for a lot of the issues we are facing here. The right lane actually on this section, after this intersection, suddenly becomes a right-only lane because Pomeroy towards, if you see towards the left here, as I'm facing it, on its way to Lawrence is a 2-lane road. So a 4-lane road is becoming a 2-lane road, which leads to all kinds of issues, traffic backups. And the best way to see all this mess is to see some pictures from any regular morning. And I'm not saying this is the whole morning, but just about 8 o'clock onwards. This is the situation on Prune Ridge going towards Cronin. This is the situation of people from Cronin trying to make a left onto Prune Ridge. And this is the Prune Ridge Avenue going all the way, and you can actually go all the way to San Tomas, and you will see this happening every morning. The traffic light, in our opinion, is a solution for not all the problems as we have envisioned, as you can see in these. If I can go back, the traffic light falls short on addressing your traffic flow issue, right? Because this is again going to remain a 4-lane going into a 2-lane road. The right lane abruptly changes, which creates to all those backups. Those are not getting addressed. The other confusion, the people trying to make a left from Prune Ridge to Cronin, that's another confusion that is happening. Other limitations that the residents have identified in the letter that we have submitted is for people on 3181 Prune Ridge Avenue and 400 Radcliffe Drive, which are around the intersection, in the morning, they wouldn't have a way to get onto the street when there is a backup like this. When either it is backed up, or if it is green, then there is traffic going on. If it is red, then they are right in front of the traffic light, so they wouldn't be able to pull in. One of them happens to be a cardiac unit nurse at Valley Medical Center. So we had all met the traffic engineer along with the residents. So we just feel that the bottom line is we are very happy that the city is doing something. We believe that the solution is incomplete, and a holistic view of what is happening with respect to traffic at this intersection would serve the residents very well. So we are just taking this opportunity for you to review what you are doing, a traffic light or not, but let's look at the whole traffic flow issue here. Just putting a light is not the solution. That's in a sense what I'm here to report.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councilmember Davis, but I have a question. Are you suggesting we don't put a light there? What is your...
We are saying, look at the traffic flow issues, and if you study the traffic flow issues, you may or may not come to the same assessment whether a light is necessary or not. We are not necessarily saying a light is not the solution, but we are saying first study the traffic flow issues, and then you may yourself assess whether a light is needed or not. The other bigger thing that you should look at is Prune Ridge, which is a totally residential section here, is this a main artery for the city where people should be driving on a 4-lane road all the way? And then that road is suddenly becoming a 2-lane road with bicyclists and everything. So that's a bigger issue that the city should evaluate.
It's a big issue, and it seems like many streets all over Santa Clara have become main arteries with the traffic and people trying to avoid everything, and there's a lot of problems caused all over. Councilmember Davis.
I live around the corner. I live on Mauricia Avenue. So when we had a couple of meetings at the Central Park Library, I understand what you're saying. I think holistically, we need to take probably from where Pomeroy is down to Woodham's and then probably down to San Tomas Expressway is put that road diet in with the bike lane. Because what's happening right now is they get to Pomeroy, they hit that light, and they zoom as fast as they can. And I've almost been hit on Woodham's a couple times.
Me too.
Just trying to get out. So I understand what you're saying. I think that we do need to look at that. I don't know if there's money in the budget to really take that on, but I think that we could if we agendize this, we can take a real holistic look at that, because when you get down past Winchester, the city of San Jose put the road diet in. So it's actually coming, the traffic is created at Winchester, zooming up to Kylie, and then keep going down. This is a cut through. This is not mostly residents. This is a cut through for people. And they don't live in your neighborhood, and they just speed through because they want to catch the light or catch something else. It's really scary, and I do feel sorry for the people that live on Prune Ridge, because when they try to get their cars out of the driveway, it's like a hit and miss. On the other side of Prune Ridge, where it goes to Lawrence Expressway, at least those people have that third lane. They have a chance to get out. And I know that there's a lot of near misses out there. We had people in a study session. The guy sat out there, put a chair out, and just watched and said he could not believe it. But it's not registered if it's with the police department. If it's a near miss or a fender bender or something like that, that is not registered. So there is a problem out there, and I understand. So this is, and Waze doesn't help you, because if there's traffic going on Lawrence Expressway, they throw them onto Prune Ridge. So I understand what's happening. So I'd like to really refer this back to the city manager and really take the holistic look at how we can do this, because it seems to me that the light would work, but also having a road diet just going down would save a lot of aggravation for a lot of residents out there. So
just one last point I want to make.
I need to just insert myself here, because the matter is a written petition on whether to schedule it or not. It's not to debate policy. We don't have a staff report, and I would caution the council to be careful about establishing a policy position and wait for the staff report in a more formal notice discussion.
Okay,
right now, before you was just
that.
whether to schedule it or not.
And I'm concerned about statements involving problems or conditions of traffic. And
thank you. I'm going to go to Councilmember May. Thank you for that. Councilmember Mahan, Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. I do believe that this warrants, some future consideration, as you say, of the entire issue. However, the traffic light concerns me because it's a crossing. Prune Ridge is a main artery. We have to admit that. It's a main artery. It goes through many cities. But Cronin leads to Maywood Park and Eisenhower School. And a traffic light is certainly necessary for the safety of children and parents that may be crossing from the neighborhood to get to the park or the school. So we can't deny the safety of a traffic signal. The traffic signal will also slow down traffic because people will have to stop more often. And so the two issues, I think, are really not connected, and I don't think we should wait for the traffic signal to go in. I guess, as you say, for the safety of the children using the park, the safety of school children going to school, to have a safe pedestrian crossing at that intersection. But I think the only thing on the agenda is actually to agendize this issue for consideration for a future council meeting, which is fine. But what happens to the traffic signal, City Manager?
Ready to be installed, I think.
Okay, so we're not taking any action not to install the signal? Okay.
And we've provided regular updates on the signal. I'm going by memory here, and I'm looking to Craig. I believe that the timing is October 2018 for installation. Yeah.
Can I make two more points?
I'm going to go to Councilmember O'Neill, and then there's time. Go ahead,
Okay,
Councilmember
great.
O'Neill.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add a couple of data points, 2 or 3, that a couple of years ago, I have the honor of chairing the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and actually a recommendation of the BPAC at that time, and with some of the funds that we thought we were going to have available. I think maybe they got used elsewhere, but I'm not sure about that. The recommendation was to carry the road diet through, because that it does tend to, if it was consistent, that it would, most studies show that it does slow down cars, and in the middle lane provides the capability for cars to get out, or to have like a safety place to stay until they can navigate all the way across. So there was that aspect of it. And one of the other things, just last evening at the Neighborhood University Relations Committee, our city traffic engineer, Dennis Ng, made the comment about sometimes if you put something in like a four-way stop, where depending on what you think you're doing to help, you may end up causing problems because people tend to start ignoring some of the traffic controls. So I thought that was interesting. But one of the other things that we found out on this street and some others when we were looking at is that, as to amplify a little bit on what Councilmember Davis was saying, that now we have so many situations where, like even on the freeways, they say if you have a fender bender, just pull over to the side and exchange information and keep on going. So when we look at data on some of these roads, all of the people who have been in an accident, and the police don't want, I know they have limited resources, they don't really want to come out unless there's a more serious damages or an injury. So we're losing track of all of those types of accidents. So then when we look at, what's the real impact in the neighborhood, we may be missing, a lot of these accidents that are happening. And I don't know, one of the things perhaps the Director of Public Works can find out, I don't remember if when people report their accidents to DMV, if that data gets fed back into the traffic system. So that might be part of what we could ask the staff to look into.
Okay.
Thank you.
City Attorney.
City Attorney.
I just want to remind the council that under the Brown Act, where you have limited yourself about what you can do and say with regard to in response to a written petition. So we're getting very far off the topic of whether or not you just want to bring it back to another agenda. So I think I would just request, because we're really not prepared to give responses at this meeting, and I'm concerned about some of the information being provided being way off the topic of the written petition. So if we would remind you that per your own policy, the only action you can take tonight is to agendize this at another council meeting.
Okay, is there a motion to refer this back to staff to agendize this? There's a motion and a second. And with that would be the timeline for the traffic light on Cronin and Prune Ridge, we had other members of the community that were on us constantly about why that light wasn't installed. So now we have the opposition to the light. So it's going to be interesting, but I think it's on its way. It's coming.
No, so
Yeah.
just to reiterate.
I know,
it's-
I
yeah.
understand. You
So-
want to look at other options as
Yeah,
well.
if you give me just
Okay.
10 more seconds, should you choose to put the light, there is not a left-only option from Prune Ridge to Cronin as it is configured right now. And that is one of the reasons for many of the accidents. And as we are saying that many of them don't get reported because the person trying to make a left, if it is not protected, one of the lanes doesn't get to see this person making a left. So
all right,
something to keep in mind. And please include the residents whenever you design such things next. We may have a valuable contribution there. It wasn't done last time. So.
No, thank you, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. So there's a motion to refer this back for a report, back to another council meeting. And please register your motion, your vote. And that passes unanimously. So you will see this and you'll be contacted when it ends up on another agenda. And thank you for your patience in the past meetings. We appreciate that. Okay, the next item we have is appointment of an applicant to the Planning Commission. And thank you, and thank you for the applicants on this item. I know it's been deferred at least 2 times. So the situation was at the time that these applicants were applying for the Planning Commission, it ended up in a tie vote, 3-3. There were 6 members present, and as you can see, there's 6 members now. So I think that these were the top 2 candidates that made it to the final round. And so I thought for this evening, if the candidates, I know they've been informed ahead of time, they could give us just a 1-minute update on an opening statement for us, and then we can ask any questions, and then we'll attempt to have 1 vote, okay? Thank you. So Jennifer, I don't know who comes up first.
I'm just going to call you in alphabetical order by last name, so Anthony Becker.
AB, yes, beginning of the alphabet. Welcome.
All right. 1 month ago, this council gave me a huge chance and a possibility to serve as our next planning commissioner. Never did I think that I would come this far. I want to thank those who have voted for me for their votes. I am very blessed by it. But at the same time, I have lost a vote with the recent resignation of Councilmember Caserta, which in reality now means I am more of an underdog and I'm living on prayers. So, sorry. I know this city like the back of my hand. I know every road, shopping center, creek, pathway. This is my city. This is my home. I know it. And this is about being grateful for what I've been given here in this great city. Santa Clara has given me everything I know. That's why I'm here, is to make a difference, not to make waves, to create a gridlock. I'm here to bring out the best of our city and what it has to offer, bring out the best sense of judgment and decisions affecting our city. And I fight for my city because our citizens come first and they are the center of what's possible. Our community is strong and we need to keep it that way. I thank you for this opportunity, and I ask those who voted against me to please cross the line and make a wise choice in voting me as the next planning commissioner. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you. Wait, Anthony, is there any questions from any council members? And I did have the opportunity to watch the meeting, so just so I can give that to the record. So seeing no questions, thank you for that presentation. Okay.
And Mr. Hicks.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. All right, so once again, I'm the recent transplant married engineer. So why should you choose me? First of all, I don't have an agenda. As far as you know, politics doesn't exactly pay the bills around here. So I'm very early in my career. I'd like to continue on that path. I think I would like to use this opportunity to basically leverage my professional skills to better my community. I think this position needs someone who can look at a lot of data, who can basically quickly get a working knowledge of the city's guiding documents, and then also look at what's coming from above in the region, in the state. I'm going to point to SB 35 as a great example of that, and then put it all together and figure out what it means for planning in the city. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity. I think as a recent transplant here, I think I've definitely seen the city as the center of what's possible. I'm sorry, I had to get it into you.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Jeremy? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much. Okay, Jennifer, 1 vote.
Everyone has 1 vote, and it'll take 4 votes for the appointment.
Okay, who first? Oh, yeah,
You can
we're all
just-
waiting for each other.
You could just take it as a motion, but if you want to do it as
Do
per
the
candidate, sure.
persons-
We'll do Anthony Becker first. Let's see here.
Anticipation.
This is for
Anthony Becker. Is there a motion to approve Mr. Becker? Motion second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Becker. To Mr. Hicks, thank you so much for applying. We appreciate, oh, he left, okay. Thank you.
He's gone.
Okay, and you'll see the city clerk for information on swearing in and the rest. Okay. Next item we have on the agenda is the direction on the management fee for the Santa Clara Chamber of Commerce and Convention Visitors Bureau for management of the Santa Clara Convention Center. City Manager?
I'm going to just make a couple of opening comments, and then I'll pass it over to Ruth Shikata, who will make the formal presentation.
Thank you.
In January, at the priority setting session, I made comments about many of our administrative weaknesses, and they included contract management, absence of procurement weaknesses, absence of audits, as well as just the high-risk environment that this creates. I think what we have tonight is the culmination of all of the above, and unfortunately, what we have is that this has been happening for multiple decades. It's unfortunate that we're here before on this matter, and largely because of the study session information that we provided, where it was noted of a budgetary action that went without disclosure to the City Council and formal approval. I hope we remedied that tonight when we showed you the budget presentation and the separate slide on fiscal activity related to the Chamber, contracts with the Convention Visitors Bureau, as well as the Convention Center. I know you might have a lot of questions around what has happened over the last decade. I can't answer all of them. Frankly, these date back to 1984 with respect to that. I can say, though, that I, too, am concerned about some of these outcomes that have taken place where we've continued to issue payment or conduct our fiscal transactions in a manner that did not meet legal standards. I have had the opportunity to meet with the Chamber representatives a couple of times, and what I did in April was I informed them that while the matter was in closed session, I fully disclosed that I was authorizing payment, but without the proper legal agreements in place, I am not comfortable issuing a management fee any longer because we just simply do not have authority under the legal contracts that we have to continue. I have asked at the same meeting that the Chamber provide an outcome on some information. You have that in your packet of what constitutes the management fee and what services support the public fund. So you have that in front of you, as well as several options for you to consider as you deliberate on this matter. I think it's unfortunate that we are bringing forward this matter. It certainly doesn't shine well on city staff as well as the administrative integrity that we have. This is not the first time matters like this have come forward, and I think it's a good starting point to take any corrective action necessary to continue to strengthen our administrative practices internally. So with that, I'll push it over to Ruth.
Thank you. Welcome, Ruth.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. So to provide some context for your decision tonight to provide some direction to staff, thought to kind of go back and brief a little bit about the history and a little bit of the context of what is the management fee for the convention center. So as the city manager discussed, this topic of conversation came up at started to come up after the study session we had on the convention center and issues related to the convention center in February of 2017. During that, February 27th of this year. During that study session, we presented a slide about the costs that we as a city incur relative to convention center activities. So the Convention Center, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Convention Center, Convention and Visitors Bureau have 3 major activities as part of its organization. There's one board of directors, and so they conduct regular, normal Chamber of Commerce membership activities, mixers, workshops, and those kinds of things for its members. It also has a CVB activity, which formed around 1975, and then it also operates the Tourism Improvement District, which was formed about 2004. The main charge of that particular business area is to attract tourism and conventions to the city, to market the city to outside organizations to promote business. And lastly, the third major area of business is the actual operation of the convention center itself, its day-to-day activities. This center of business also does some marketing for the convention center, but usually on a much shorter term basis. The CVB operates marketing of the city and of the convention center on a longer term basis. So maybe 12 months out or longer. So the Chamber operated the Convention and Visitors Bureau from about 1975. And then in 1983, the Council considered alternatives for operating the Convention Center and recommended that the Chamber be picked as the operator. And so we have now a management agreement that dates back to 1984. So this agreement was an evergreen agreement. It didn't have any termination. So a lot of the practices that were contained in this agreement really haven't been updated since that time, thus leading to some of the controls issues that the manager was discussing. So some of the basic terms of that 1984 agreement include the Chamber's duties of marketing and promoting the convention center, coordinating its use, booking events, scheduling, administering the budget, hiring personnel in order to run the convention center. Again, these duties are centered around the day-to-day activities of running the facility. As we start to talk about the fee and the compensation for those duties, the management agreement does not describe specifically a fee associated with those duties, and it describes how monies may or may not be moved around. It doesn't provide specific authority for the use of public funds to compensate. So what happens is that the Chamber and the Convention Center submits a budget to the city on an annual basis, and it's provided to staff and as the budget is formulated. And historically, the management fee has been included as part of those budget documents. It's one line item out of many. But what has happened over the years is that when the budget for the convention center is presented to the council for its consideration, it's all rolled up into one large line item. So thus, as the manager was saying a little earlier, there's not a lot of transparency as to all the components that may go into the costs and the revenues associated with running the convention center, and thus the issue. So these are examples of some of the budget documents that are public. So in the CAFR, there is a note every year about how much money is provided to the chambers for a management fee, but we don't talk extensively about the CAFR here publicly, nor do we go through the individual notes that appear. This is an example. The example to the right is what happens as a presentation of part of our budget. And so you can see, as I was saying a little earlier, that the line items are all rolled up so that the management fee is not prominently displayed. So historically, we have been paying a management fee to the Chamber of Commerce, and this practice is probably dated back to the 1980s. As far as our budget documents are concerned, we were able to trace back at least through the 90s, and then and we have not pulled boxes back out from the archives, but we presume that in fact that there was a fee dated back into the 80s. From the fiscal year 2014-15, we started to see the Chamber had made a request for an increase of their management fee, in large part because that fee has not been increased since the 1980s. And then in 2016-17, the way that the management fee was requested was it shifted from a fixed fee basis to a fixed fee that was based upon 2% of anticipated revenue of the convention center for that year. So in 16-17, the budgeted amount was about $137,000, and that amount was paid on an installment basis on a monthly. In 17-18, the projected 2% of revenues was at about $146,000. And then for 18-19, we've carried on with this practice. Right now, it's currently proposed at $150,000, but then we are asking for council direction on what to do with this fee, and then the budget would be adjusted as directed. So the direction to staff, again, as the manager had mentioned, that the management agreement does not provide for a specific payment of the fee, and the fee was increased without proper disclosure. So the fee amount, we don't have authority to pay the management fee because it's not specifically included in the management agreement, and we want to rectify that immediately. So what we're asking for is direction from the council on the fee itself, the amount of the fee, or the way by which the fee should be calculated, and then that way we can work with the chamber to document it appropriately and then bring it back to council for further consideration if that's warranted. So the staff report has 5 different potential options. None of these options are specifically recommended by the staff. We're seeking council direction, and the council may choose to look at one of these 5 options or choose a separate option, and at your discretion. So some of the possible fee options include a fixed fee based upon a budgeted revenue. This is the current practice of what we've been doing, so that they have a 2% of anticipated budget revenue. There's no reconciliation at the end of the year. We take that projected amount divided by 12, and then they're paid that amount on a monthly basis. The second option might be the same general principle, but with a general reconciliation at the end of the fiscal year. I have to note that at last fiscal year, they had a 2% projection. They had 2% of a projected revenue, and were paid a fixed amount on a monthly basis. If we did a look back, a reconciliation, that they exceeded their projected revenues, so that if we had an option like this, that we would owe them a little bit more money. The third option is a fixed fee amount, just a negotiated amount, something similar to how the practice was through the 80s and 90s and 2000s, where there was an amount determined, and then that's the amount of fee that they got. We could go back and reestablish the fee at $45,000, and we can take a look at a CPI increases and make a calculation based on that and establish that as a fee amount. Or we can possibly look at a combination of that, where it's an incentive-based, some fixed fee amount with some incentive if in fact that they perform beyond expectations. So alternatives could be that we would bring forward an amendment based upon your direction. We could discontinue paying the management fee altogether because, again, we don't currently have authority to pay for a management fee, or that some other potential alternate up to the council's direction. And with that, we're available to respond to any questions.
I just want to add one item for the record. There is, as an attachment in your packet, I believe it was, it's dated May 10th, 2018. It is a letter from the chamber that puts forward their preference, and that is, I think it looks like option 5. It's the, quote, a module of the combination of a flat fee enhanced by a performance incentive, which is item number 5.
Question for Ruth. I have a question for staff. So starting in 2014, the management fees started increasing. Do we have any documentation that memorializes that anywhere? From 2014 through 2018?
There isn't a legal agreement that memorializes it. In fact, what should have followed is much like the actions that you took tonight on some of the, off of some appropriations. The council did establish an appropriation, although it was not disclosed. It was rolled up as a line item. And what should have followed were the necessary amendments to the agreement dated 1984 in order to put an increased management fee into place and pay off of it. That's what's been absent.
So are there any amendments to that 1984 agreement?
No. I do want to say that we did look at our files. There are some budget notes. There's some information that was inputted into our budget system for documentation purposes of what staff took as notes to substantiate the increase. They're working documents, but nothing formally or legally was done that would have been brought forward to the council.
So how did it happen that this fee was increased from 2014 to 18 without council approval, public knowledge?
This is where
anyone's knowledge actually until the consultant that we hired put that one slide up a month ago. That was the first time I had seen this. So how is that possible?
I don't have all of the information on how it's possible, but I can share with you over the last couple of months, the council has been presented with several corrective actions and items that you have needed to have to confront based on some administrative weaknesses. The budget submittal for an increase was put forward to staff. It was processed, and none of the required paperwork was put before the city council, and payments were increased and issued. It is reflective of several other contract management, fiscal control issues that you have had to deal with recently. I also want to add that, as I mentioned in the study session, this organization for a service of that scale has not assigned the appropriate capacity. We don't have one individual who owns the nuts and bolts of contract management. It is a collateral duty, and it's transferred from individual to individual. And it is reflective in the problem that you have in front of you tonight.
All right. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember when this came up, I was in Washington, D.C. with some of our Silicon Valley Power team. And I came back to the hotel, and I was sitting on my bed with my laptop, and I was like watching this, and I was like, what? What's that? So over the years, I've kind of asked questions like, once again, thinking from my experience in business and being on the side where we were procuring services for people and also where people were procuring services and material and things for us. And there are there are standard types of models that you use. And most of the time, all of your management costs that are aggregated. All that's what I used to say. How much is Steve Van Doren's salary are we paying? Because like, oh, I'm assuming that we're loading some of management costs in, and everyone's like, at that time the answers were, well, no, we don't really know. And when we look at now, this isn't the Convention and Visitors Bureau fee, which has its own budget. This is the convention center, which has a very able general manager that has a whole staff of people. And my assumption was when I saw that the costs of all the management were built into what they charge people to use the services of the convention center. So I guess my question is, have we gotten a breakdown of what extra service or oversight or whatever is being provided, and who is providing it at the chamber, since we all know that Lisa Moreno is in charge of the convention center and all the people who work there. So I guess that's what do we know about what is actually being delivered to us for this fee?
I think that's an excellent question, and it is something that I raised at an April meeting with chamber representatives, where I specifically asked the targeted question: what is the outcome that the city can see for the issuance of public funds? And there was a struggle to answer the question. You do have in front of you a document presented by the chamber, and what has continued as an issue that, and in fairness, I've not had a chance to sit down with the chamber and disclose this, although the director and I have had a couple conversations, is to really understand due diligence. And we've had the opportunity to receive 990s and look at those, although we've not been able to study them in great detail. We've had the opportunity to be presented with their conflict of interest policy, just as a routine document that we should request for understanding the conflict, how conflicts are managed. We have not received all of the documents. In fact, I've been trying almost since April 13th meeting to receive conflicts of interest policies in their totality. And so we've received some partial information, but it yet doesn't speak to how conflicts are managed or things of that sort. So we've not been able to pursue that conversation. I did ask for copies of either board agendas related, or the board agendas, board reports, or board minutes, to better understand, and that was a recent request over the last maybe week and a half or so, to better understand at the board level, which is where the management is occurring, of how they manage and what kinds of topics come up that may constitute the issuance of these public funds. And I just received some of those documents yesterday. I've not had an opportunity to review them and be able to share with you. So there is a need to better understand the purpose of the management fee, particularly if there is an interest in having performance attached to it. I think there's a need to be a little bit more transparent. We've had to go back and forth on documents, and the management agreement that is dated 1984 clearly states of the city's right to check for facilities and operations, and these requests fall under that provision. And so there has been some lag time that frankly doesn't allow for me to fully respond to you today.
So perhaps the representatives of the chamber can explain some of that?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Let's finish with the council questions first, and then we'll go there. Vice Mayor Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. So basically, you don't have a breakdown at this point. You don't have a breakdown of how payments have been used. These payments, these $45,000 that have continually increased. Now at as of last payment, $145,000. We don't have a breakdown.
There is an attachment in your packet that provides a list, a bulleted list of the types of services. But I did ask the question in April about what is the delta from a $45,000 jump to a $140,000 jump. What new benefit or new service did the city receive that would constitute or create the value of $100,000 of new management. That we've not been able to get through, and I thought perhaps it may be in their minutes. I thought perhaps there might be something that we could understand more closely, but we're the conversations, we've just not gotten that far. We're still receiving documents.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Colstead.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess I'm not as concerned about how we got here as I am concerned about how we're going to deal with this going forward. And on slide number 10, the management agreement doesn't provide for payment of a management fee. And the fee was increased without proper budgetary disclosure. And on the next slide, they talk about 5 possible options, and the next slide, 3 alternatives. And I guess what I'd like to do is, I guess everyone knows, a fiscal conservative, and I kind of like item number 2 about a percentage of the revenue, and I would change budgeted to net, a percentage of the net revenue at the end of the fiscal year. And there might be a hybrid to that. You might be able to have a percentage of the budgeted revenue, the net revenue, reconciled at the end of the year with a fixed amount factored in there, either or. I'm not sure how you could do that, but clearly we're responsible. I'm glad that the mayor took a good hard look at this one so we can get it on the straight and narrow, and I appreciate the manager's comments as well. I don't know how to get to that place, but I'm assuming that it would require a real detailed analysis of what services we're getting, how much those services cost, what portion of the net revenue is that, and then come up with the definitive amount, the number. And that would probably involve finding out if we're getting a good bang for our buck and we're making a net profit going forward for the city. So if there's a way we could extrapolate all those comments into a motion, I would make one talking about the a percentage of the net revenue that this convention center creates for the city, or a fixed amount, either or. And I know it's going to be a nightmare for the staff to have to analyze all of this, but we have to do what the mayor and the council was getting at, which was making sure this is a good deal for the citizens of Santa Clara. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Colstead. Any other council members?
Madam Mayor?
Yes,
I'd like
City
an
Attorney.
opportunity to just kind of add a few comments.
Yes, go ahead.
I would also recommend that if you do direct us to come back with changes, I think it's very important that we no longer have a quote unquote evergreen contract. I think it's very important for contracts to have clearly defined terms in them. And it's also very important that we clear up this conflict of interest issue, because all corporations are required to, especially nonprofits, to have clearly defined conflict of interest codes, which prevent self-dealing by directors. And I think there are some questions about that in this particular contract that haven't been cleared up. And I think it's important that we, in the expenditure of public money, that we reinforce enforcing the state corporation laws regarding conflicts of interest and preventing the use of public money in self-dealing situations.
Thank you for that. And I think it's important to point out that I think our city management staff, city attorney staff, has been trying to work with the chamber for a couple months now. I know some information was given yesterday and some late last week and other things, but I know information has been requested for a while. And I agree, Councilmember Colstead, we need to go forward. However, when you talk about public money that was spent without the knowledge of the city council or the public, and trying to figure out how this was done without, for several years now, without any discussion, any disclosure, management fees are tripled. And I understand that there was not a lot of oversight on how the checks were written. And there might have been direct access to our general fund. It concerns me, and I'm not going to sweep it under the carpet and say, oh, let's not look back, let's look forward, because there was some major mishaps here with our public finances. And I just think that there is a level of trust now that is just not there, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of, dealing with the chamber and the management of the convention center. First of all, I have no intention to affect any of the employees that work at the convention center or anything like that. But I think that the management fee that was increased on their own accord without any oversight by the council or the public is unacceptable. I don't know how it happened, but I think we need to get to the bottom of how it happened. I don't think that there's any documentation provided by the chamber or provided through the city that would approve any of these increases. And by rolling the numbers into the budget is another way of not disclosing these amounts. And it troubles me. And I'm not in any way going to be a part of that or approving any of that. And so I think that I look forward to getting the documents from the chamber, but at this time, I can't approve any management fee at all for the Chamber of Commerce, for the management of the convention center. Again, I don't want to affect any of the employees and don't plan to do that of the convention center, but I think the city needs to take over oversight of the convention center management because they shouldn't have had free access to our general fund. So, Councilmember Mahan.
I do have several questions. Well, as I recall, in years past, when we had budget presentations, the convention center itself would come forward with its own budget presentation and budget request, and it was done at our open meetings, and we saw a written report, and we would fold that into the budget and approve it. I don't know what happened last year or 2 years ago. I wasn't here. But as I looked at the budget, that fee is in the budget, and the budget was approved, was it not?
Let's go back to the slide with the language. My understanding is from past budgets, and we can call the finance director up if she has any additional knowledge, or Ruth Shikata, is that the item was rolled up into a one line item number, and in there the activity of what the numbers supported weren't detailed. I can see if Ruth or Angie want to provide any additional comment.
Go back to the slide.
Or correct what I just stated.
Can you go back to the slide with the language from the contract?
So it's my understanding that during the previous, I believe it was the 16-17 budget, that during the meeting with staff, that was relayed that was going to be the 2% of revenue and was approved during that budget process. It was included in the budget. And you're correct. When we do the agency funds, we have a rolled up number. So it isn't broken out. It's only recently when we asked the Convention Center to change their quarterly report to be similar to the Stadium Authority that they've actually been showing the management fee on their details. So you'll see that in their quarterly report that you have in the next item.
So might I interject? This is the language from the contract itself. It says clearly no monies will be transferred to the chamber for the operation of the chamber except for services received as identified in the budget as approved by the City Council of City. I think that clearly refers to a line item for a management fee. I don't think just because you're approving an overall budget that you're identifying services identified in the budget. There's no, as far as I know, there was not in any budget that the council approved identification of services provided in exchange for a management fee or a line item for a management fee. So I don't think
And
approval of...
what page does that appear on of the contract?
I'll have to look it up.
Or what section?
I'll ask for Ruth to look for that in the management agreement.
And do we have clear evidence that the chamber itself or the management of the chamber itself actually wrote checks on our general fund?
The process, they had access to the city's general account, and it was isolated through a zero-based accounting structure, whereas dollars were put in daily and expenditures were removed. But ultimately, there was access for the chamber to issue checks out of that account, and they went unaudited as well as not regularly monitored. What we have now in place
Hold on,
is...
I'm sorry. So where did the money come from that went into the account?
The money came from the city's general fund.
Huh?
And I believe also from revenues from the convention center.
That's correct.
And checks were issued. And what we have in place now, which we did not have before, is we send a staff person over on check run dates, as we've agreed with the convention center and the chamber and CVB, where staff goes and looks at the supporting documentation and is the first signator on a check, and then from there it follows the other, whether it's CVB or the convention center. And so that is something that you should be concerned with, just given some of the recent issues that you've had before you, where changes were made to either payroll that were unaudited and unreported. It just demonstrates that there's a high-risk environment whenever access of that sort is given either to staff or to third parties.
So they no longer have that access? That's been corrected?
As of March, I believe they no longer have that access. March, April timeframe.
Do we know if that's going on with any other contract?
I'm sorry, it's April timeframe.
The golf course is being treated the same way
Okay.
on the what we call ZBA accounts.
In response to the specific section in the management agreement, the section, the overall section is titled Financing Convention Center Operations, which starts on page 6, but the specific line that we have on the screen is on the top of page 7 in the first partial paragraph. The agreement is old, so it doesn't even have section numbers, so it's a little harder to identify.
Okay, but it doesn't say specifically, when you read it in context, it doesn't say how that budget's supposed to be broken down. If there's management fee or line items, it just says their budget. And like I say, they always had done that before. We'd get a presentation from the convention center general CEO, and we would always approve those numbers in open session. But like I say, I can't speak to the last 2 years, so I don't know what went to where. Are we going to hear from, we have people from the convention center?
We will
Are
after
going
the
to hear that?
council finishes
Okay,
their
these are just still questions.
content. Questions? Do you have more questions, Councilmember?
I'll wait till after I hear from the convention center.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis.
So Brian or city manager, so you're saying that we still don't have all the documentation that correlates with this money coming out of our general fund? I mean, there's no documentation. So how do they draw down on funds? I mean, how do they?
We actually do now, whereas where before the transactions were not monitored by city staff and obviously not audited. What we have now is we reached agreement on a process and how we would authorize checks. And we have a staff member who works with the chamber representatives and CVB and Convention Center to look at the check and the supporting documentation that substantiates the need to issue that payment. And then upon that, the city staff is the first signator on the check, and then from there it gets either it gets the required signatures from the convention center and from the chambers and or CVB. Then once the checks now have 3 signatures on a city check, where for this account, whereas before the city was not a signature on a check for which it was backing the public funds.
So the chamber, the CBB, and the convention center all could write checks to our general fund, from our general fund? Or just one?
It's the general account for issuing checks. So in some cases, general fund may be a source of payment, but there's it's a checking account. And it's a zero-based account that is not uncommon in municipal practice. However, I think what is uncommon is the lack of monitoring of the issuance of checks. And you know, I've not been around long enough to know how long this has been in practice, but it is certainly unconventional to not have that that type of activity monitored. I don't know whether there's anything beyond how to read that, except for access to its public fund account needs to generally be audited and monitored regularly. And that's in place with respect to the monitoring now.
Now.
Yes.
So then my next question goes back to the 1984 contract. And I guess we didn't have a contract reader in place or whatever. So it clearly states that this $45,000 was not in there at all. So how did we get that $45,000? How did that come about? Do we need to have staff go and research that? Or, I mean, I'm just curious as to where that number came from.
I'm not able to answer that question, and perhaps that's where the chambers is. As Ruth was saying, we've not gone into the archives past 1990s, but we do know that at some point in time, based on the language of the management fee, a dollar value was assigned. Likely at that point in time, an amendment could have been made, should have been made, that identifies the number and the form of which payments will be issued. That was not done, and nor has it been done even with the recent increases.
So not only do we not know what's going on, the chamber never came back since 1984 to say we need more money because this is what we're doing or whatever. So nobody ever really looked at this contract. This just kind of like kept going.
I can't speak to, this is a decades-long issue, so I can't speak to, you know, the year by year or blow by blow. I can only speak to the narrative that I hear from staff within the organization, and that you're right, it has not been checked, and the appropriate documents have not been presented to council for action, as you've had some action before you this evening, and some you've approved and some you've deferred. And we continue to process the management fee payment as described by our assistant city manager earlier.
Okay, yeah, I'd rather hear from that chamber.
I have one more question. The $45,000 management fee, I think, had been identified in previous years. For many years, it was the same fee since probably since 1984. And then in 2014-15, the fee started increasing and then dramatically increased in, it's increased in 14-15 and then 15-16 and then dramatically increased from 16-17 all the way through 18. What should have happened, City Attorney, to increase that fee? What should have been the process to talk about, you know, increasing the fee of this nature?
Within the current agreement, at a minimum, it should have been presented as a line item in the budget, because the contract says no monies will be transferred for the chamber for operation of the chamber except for services received as identified. So it should have been identified in the budget as a management fee, and then also, I think properly, at a minimum, they should have explained what the management fee was for. What services were they performing in exchange for the management fee? It's you know, I worked on the convention center management contract for San Jose, the Team San Jose contract, where they took over management, and that was a joint enterprise, basically CVB and operation and maintenance of the convention center, and that contract was vastly different than this one. I mean, it had much, much more detail, much more specificity about why the management fee would be earned, what portions of it would be earned. So, you know, all I can say is this is a very old contract that really needs an overhaul. Regardless of who's operating the convention center, I would really recommend that even if you were to try to do this through the budget and identify the management fee through that, I would still recommend amending the contract to be much more specific about not only what the management fee should be, when it should be earnable, but what the use of the management fee can be used towards, and also some other tightening up of how this is managed.
Can I
Yes.
just be more clear? So you should have approved by line item as described in the agreement, the value, the amount of the management fee that will be paid. You will, through your budget action, appropriate the dollars. That doesn't mean that there's authority to pay those dollars. It just means that it is appropriated and earmarked for that expenditure. What should have followed then was an amendment to the management agreement year after year each time with full disclosure on a council agenda presented to the city council for consideration, where you have a draft amendment to the agreement attached that would explain the form of payment, what performance outcomes would be received, and or whether it was a flat fee. And then from there, you would, if you approve it, we would take that back and have that on file and issue payment from there. That's the part that we don't have. That's missing.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Do we have a representative from the chamber that would like to speak? Please come forward. Good evening.
Mayor, council members, my name is Joe Sadinsky, and I'm the chairman of the board for the Santa Clara Chamber of Commerce Convention Center and Visitors Bureau. I've also got
Chris Boyd, senior executive at Kaiser Permanente Santa Clara, and I'm going to be one of the incoming president of the chamber.
Good evening.
We put together a presentation for us.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, we've been, what the presentation will show you, do we have a clicker here? This isn't. So what we're going to go through is, we'll give you a little bit of history with some of what you've heard already. This goes back a long, long time. I think we first started in '77 when the chamber had the vision for the convention center. And the agreement goes in, I think it was in '84. So I don't think you're going to have any disagreement from us about having to redo the contracts. I think that certainly has shown that we need to as an incoming president. I certainly want to see that as well. We've got something going on here. I think one of the things that, I'm not doing that.
The man in the box back there.
So, you know, we've, over the years, 32 years, we have run a profitable convention center. And that is not, we'll show you that has not always been the case. We've developed a great relationship with the convention center staff. You know, when we talk about family, it actually, you know, Lisa and Bill, they're at our meetings. We spend a lot of time talking. In fact, that's, I'm going to get off script a little bit because, you know, you talk about going from the 45,000, which had been in place for you know, almost 20 some odd years without any change. And then when the RDA came, and you know, there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to be happening with the convention center and properties and all this stuff, we found that most of our chamber board meetings were being spent talking about the convention center. And at the, you know, and what we weren't talking about is chamber business, the things that we should be talking about. So that's when we did some research and found that, geez, 45,000 really does not, you know, that is on the very, very low end of the compensation for management fees for convention centers. In fact, I think if you look at San Jose, they're, what is that, 1.2 million, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot more money than what we're looking at, and we went from a flat fee to what we thought was incentive-based background. So here's the things we're going to go through. We'll talk about tonight, the summary background, management services. We are going to be using the same information that was presented a couple of months ago by your consultant. The only difference is going to be that we are taking out the convention, the Visitors Bureau. This is just a contract with the Convention Center, so we've separated it from the Visitors Bureau. Here's a summary that I was talking about. Over the last 9 years, we've brought $2.3 million to the city. Our leadership has proved highly satisfied employees at the convention center, and we've also had great support through our what we've been able to attract in terms of you know, people coming to the convention center. So our hotels have been very happy. And you know, when we went through this a couple of years ago with the when it was in really disarray, we weren't sure what we were going to do. And at that time is when we came forward and said, I don't think we want to be in this business at all. And then we stepped back and said, okay, look, we've been successful. We've got great relationships. We're doing a good job. If we keep going, we should be compensated as a management fee worthy of what the work that we're doing. And we decided to retool our chamber board. And we brought on hotel people that really know this business that now can sit and help us manage going forward. It talks about in '74 we had the vision, and 10 years later the council approved us as the management entity. In '86 we opened the first part of the convention center and began planning for the second one. In 2009 the Mission Ballroom was open. So, you know, convention centers generally run at a loss. What we've done is we have, and we'll show you in a moment, that we have run a profitable convention center. Management fees you can see range from the mid-50s for smaller ones to over $1 million for the larger convention centers. A couple of examples, the Moscone Center lost $4.5 million a year on average. That was in discussion with their people. And then the San Jose Convention Center runs at a loss. They get $1.2 million, and they run at a $4.5 million loss. And we've added the link there if you want to verify that.
So this is some of the activities that we perform. We provide to the highest standards in the industry. In fact, we've gotten multiple awards of financial improvements. We are at a profit. We're not a cost center. We're a profit center. That's amazing for a convention center. Financial reporting, we report out our financials every month on a monthly basis so that they can be audited and reviewed. Community involvement, collaboration, we brought on the hotels, we've got the TOT, we've got the TID, organizational structure, roles and responsibility, especially during the RDA, whenever the dissolution was in process. That was a nightmare for all of us, and still could be as we move into the future. Payroll administration, strategic direction, specifically on parking issues, oversight on the budget, general liability, workers' comp. These are some of the things that we do on a regular basis. Management fee includes, the manager's fee was $45,000 for 29 years. I mean, imagine not getting a raise for 29 years. The study session in 2006, we met with Lisa Gilmore and Debbie Davis, myself, Ravinder Law, and Paul Dines, and we reviewed the current structure at $45,000, and we decided that a 2% flat fee was acceptable and was asked to put it into the budget for approval. The management fee changed by the council vote. It was approved, and right here's the line item where it gets on the general ledger, $6,100, where it goes for approval in the budget. And the 2%, that's less than a credit card transaction fee for managing a $6-7 million business. This talks about where we actually, over the last 9 years, have put $2.2 million into the city coffers. From 2009 to 2012, we had 152% growth. 2009 to 2017, 188% growth. Not too bad.
Year-over-year average when you go from 2009 to 2017, 27% annual growth. And again, over the 9 years, we've added $2.3 million to the general fund.
We believe in an incentive program to make sure that we're both all driving in the same direction to make the convention center as profitable as it can be.
So thank you for letting us have a chance to talk. You know, I think we're not in disagreement with anything that we're talking about of going back and putting the proper, I mean, we didn't create this thing, you know, in '84. Been living with it and no one has checked it, no one has gone through it. We went on, that's just the way it has been done. So we appreciate the diligence and looking into it, and I don't think there's any argument on our part that if change is necessary, we would welcome that.
We're in this together.
We're in
Let's
this
put it together.
You know, and it's unfortunate that you know, these things didn't happen in the past, but that wasn't us. That was, you know, that's just what we were living with, and you know, there's been a lot of history here. So if you want changes in the future, you know, we're going to be open to that. We're transparent with the information. I think, you know, and if I get a sense that this may be more, you just don't want the chamber. And if that's it, there's a remedy to get out of the contract and go to a, you know, an request for proposal if you want to do that. Then we decide whether we want to do it. But I'll tell you, this, you know, you say, I don't want to do a management fee. Yeah, this doesn't happen for free. No one's doing this kind of work for free. As you know, the city attorney knows. So we think this is a very good deal for the city, and we're taking care of business with the convention center. You know, and you know, Mayor, I appreciate your saying we don't want to affect the employees. When you do have a change in a management fee, though, the first thing they do is affect the employees. We've worked very hard at developing the relationships with the convention.
All right, I think we have some council questions here. Councilmember Kolstad.
I don't have a question, but based on what I've heard from the council and from the Convention and Visitors Bureau of the Chamber, I have an idea that all of you contributed to, and I'd like to run it up the flagpole if it's okay. It's a possible course of action that will address several of the concerns that I just heard. One, I would really, really like to keep the convention center open and making money. And I would propose that we would craft an interim agreement that is mutually beneficial both to the chamber and to the city. That would be a management agreement, because I know that the chamber's not going to do this for free. I would suggest a % of the net profit, but whatever the staff and the chamber come up with mutually, I would like to see it and see if it pencils out. And to answer some of the council questions, I would recommend that on a parallel track, we initiate an audit, a forensic audit of the convention center, the profit and loss, their performance over time, how much net went to the city, how much we paid in management fees, and come back and look at that. And I think the city attorney could clear it up for me, but I know that there's a jurisdictional thing, a statute of limitations on how far back we can go. I'm not clear what that is. And the other thing is, I just want to point out, from listening to the staff and to the chamber, this isn't our fault, but it's our responsibility to clean it up. And we both inherited this mutually. We've been good business partners for a long, long time. I don't want to jeopardize that. But if there is blame to be placed, I'd like to know where it goes. But more importantly, let's keep that convention center open, get an interim agreement, and proceed. So I kind of throw that out there as the skeleton of a motion.
Councilmember Mahan.
Could you go back to the slide with the budget item on it? This one, yes. So is that how the budget item appeared in the budget in 2016-17? Is that the year?
So that looks like the budget that they present to the budget staff. And then just like with the other city departments, you see everything rolled up in categories. The same thing happens with the convention center. They do provide us, just like the departments do when we meet with them, a listing just like this of their budget requests.
So of that money, the 136,699 was they're calling it administration fee. Is that the management fee?
Correct.
So staff knew what the management fee was.
Correct.
So staff rolled up the number, not the convention center.
Correct. That is correct. Previous staff.
This is where I can't fault the chamber, because if that's the case, because this is the kind of detail we used to get when we had, I mean, the CEO of he was both chambers and convention center, would himself come to us and present this to us. So we had that level of detail. But so I'm just clarifying, the chamber presented this level of detail, which includes a management fee parceled out to staff, but staff didn't present it to council.
So they actually, this is just a very small portion of their budget. It's actually a longer document with every single line item that they're requesting, and then the overage. So they do what they asked for last year or what was in the budget to show us what they're proposing. And yes, at that time, the staff just rolls that up into the agency. Like I showed you the slide. If you look in the budget, you'll see that.
Okay. And then I didn't, the next slide, which showed the overall net profit of 2.1 million. Does that include TOT tax, or is that, does that include any TOT tax?
No, we took out the TOT. We took out the TOT when we took out the Visitors Bureau, because we thought it was revenue and cost.
Okay.
So,
so that's strictly convention center operations.
I think if you, I think in the appendix we have the TOT that came over the timeline.
Could we see that? Because I didn't see that yet.
No, it's not in the presentation. It's in an attachment.
Oh.
That doesn't work whenever we do this.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, there's TOT.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
So are those just hotel room nights connected to the convention center activity?
I'm going to defer to Lisa.
No, it's everything.
No, that is all TOT tax generated from all sleeping rooms in the city of Santa Clara.
Okay. Do you have a methodology of parceling out just the TOT?
We actually do have it. I don't have it in this appendix, but we do have it.
Okay.
This past year, it's about roughly $1.2, $1.3 million from
Just in
CVB
1 year?
bookings. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, that's all my questions. Thanks.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. So let's go back to my question about, what the fee is really for. Because as I look at the contract, and there's it's kind of even for 1984, not very good contract. But there's other language in here about operating funds, and it sounded like you were supposed to set up some funds, and at the end of these time periods, the money is supposed to go back to the city and all that. But it talks about what the convention center management is supposed to do. So once again, so these activities that you have enumerated here, so both of you gentlemen have full-time jobs. You're not, management employees of the chamber. So who's doing these things? I mean, so and that's, like these kind, so that's what I'm trying to get at here. If this is a nonprofit board, you have a team of professional people. Is the fee actually supplementing Lisa Moreno's salary? Is that what it's for? Or are you saying that the chamber board has been compensated? The chamber itself as a nonprofit entity has been received. That's what I'm kind of lost here in this structure. If that's what you're saying, because or whose salary is that fee allocated to?
It's not allocated to a specific person. It goes into like a general fund to help run the chamber. We've got a limited staff to help run all this, and all the board is volunteers, and we don't get compensated. But we do spend a tremendous amount of time, as you're aware, in our board meetings. I personally spend at least 20 hours a week or a month.
Okay, so you're just saying this is going to the chamber's general fund. It's not like,
It's going to the
you know,
general,
like I said,
it's going to the chamber general fund
most
right
of the
now.
time, you kind of have some way to enumerate who's doing what to receive what kind of payment.
And certain ways you can allocate how the funds are being utilized. And many nonprofits, you do that. I do that with the Red Cross. We do that some, and we do it at the Chamber of Adaptive Arts. With the Chamber of Commerce, we're not doing that.
Okay, so when we talk about also, when we talk about the profitability of the convention center, are we taking into account the capital costs of maintaining and operating the center, not just your revenue that you're receiving for events?
I'm going to defer that to Lisa.
Because I think we did have an assessment done, and I think there's like hundreds of millions of dollars of work that needs to be done.
That's for sure.
I know, but I'm just saying, when you're talking about whether a convention
Please don't
center is
interrupt her.
profitable or not, you have to look at what else are we putting into it. And I'm not saying, I mean, I understand about it's, you know, you hopefully have it as a way to draw other types of business in, but I think we have to be looking at the complete picture and not just looking at a slice.
Yes, if you take the numbers of the scorecard that they put up earlier, it did incorporate the capital improvement that's been given over the past 10 years. It was a 10-year period. So it incorporated both the P&L from the convention center, the capital improvement, the district funds, as well as the lease agreements that used to be there with the RDA with the land, and then that when it stopped payment because of the dissolution of the RDA. So that's what that one scorecard showed. And it did show a net profit over 10 years of $2.3 million.
Including all the capital expenditures?
That is correct.
So
because
have we
unfortunately,
been...
with the state of situations within the city, with the 2008 decline in the economy, we actually didn't receive a lot of capital funds through those past 10 years.
Right.
There was a decline.
Right. So have we been, and shame on me for not really realizing it, but I don't think that I've ever seen, first of all, that slide that had the general ledger account numbers, I've never seen that. I've never seen anything. I mean, usually, I mean, I've never seen anything that refers to a general ledger. So just as a point of information, I mean, you may have submitted it. I'm just saying that I, as a council member, don't recall
if I can
ever
go
seeing
back
that.
in history, those spreadsheets, as Angela discussed when she addressed that, is every year, like a city department, the convention center and the Convention and Visitor Bureau sit with the city finance department, and we discuss the operations expenditures, our request, the proposed budget. That is also given to them prior to that meeting for the city to look at. We do go line by line item, and that particular item you see was highlighted in red because anything that we have as a decrease or increase from those line items are actually discussed. They're actually brought out to attention. So the city staff and the director of finance could ask any questions about any of those finances. So that is how we put forth our budget. It's been that way since 86. I mean, it has been that way. That's the way we present our proposed budget. And then it is in city staff to then put forth in their budget books.
Okay, so Lisa, and you know, we all know what a great job you and your team do managing the centers. But so when that fee, when we look at the management fee, do you, and when you're putting together your budget, is that to partially compensate for your salary as the general manager?
No, that is strictly for the administration of the management of the convention center via the chamber, which would be called out in a management contract, as the city attorney discussed, is typically called out. It's typically called out whether it be a base fee with an incentive or a percentage or however it is. It's typically called out in a contract. But because we all know that the contract is very old and it was never addressed for whatever reason, none of us here know that, but they are called out in our budgets when there is an increase of any kind. And then it's up to city staff, usually comes back to us with an overview of that meeting and lets us know if there are any changes that we need to make to that budget spreadsheet prior to it going into the budget book.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for right now.
And if I may clarify also some other things as it relates to the accounting and how it happens at the convention center and has, again, just because that's just the way it's been. And, you know, we had a lot of the same city staff for also many years before we had turnover in leadership, that is the way we had processed the checks, because we have a zero balance account that's a combined account, that the checks were written, their statements are sent to the city every month, the checks get signed, and they all go through the city account. That is just the way the accounting worked. And now with the new leadership and some of the processes that they're changing, we now have the city finance department come to the convention center, and I sign the checks. The city finance, Dave, comes and looks at those, verifies those, and then one person from the chamber board, which is Joe typically, or Dave Tompkin, will sign the check. So that's the three signatures.
Well, right, so, but somebody from our finance department or the city manager's
There has
delegate.
been changes, and they are now coming over, yes.
Okay, and so they're signing too, so the city is signing the checks?
Yes.
As well as representatives?
But there's always been backup to everything that we've ever done at the convention center. And it's always been there for anybody to audit. It just so happens that that process was never put in place.
Right, we never, so for 30 years, we haven't had an audit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis?
Joe, if I remember correctly, that meeting in her office was when you guys came to us and said, we don't, because of RDA, we don't want to run the convention center anymore. And then the conversation went to, well, if you're not going to run this, what would be the process or whatever? And Paul Dines sent our city manager a specific letter in detail that nowhere in there did it say, we were going to give you a 2% increase because we don't have the authorization to do that. So I really take offense to the fact that you said that we were going to give you this when you came to us and said, we're concerned about running the convention center because of RDA, and we would like out of the deal. That's what you said, and I remember that. And we had conversations about how would you run it? Because you were incoming president, Paul was going out, and there were concerns on how you were going to do this. And I understand that we did address the issue that $45,000 at the time, which unbeknownst to me was in this 1984 contract, was not in the 1984 contract. So how we got this $45,000 is beyond, well, whatever. But going forward, I just kind of felt that when you came to us, it was like, how do we restructure? What do we do? What are our options? What's going to happen? But there's no way that we can approve something like that. The two of us. I mean, if that happens, then I could have Steve Schott come walking in and say, Deb, I want this approved like now. That's ridiculous. That just does not happen. So I was really upset about the fact that you called us out on this. We had a great conversation,
and
but
you said 2000. You both were there. 2% sounds like.
But why did Paul Dines not put that in his documented letter?
Actually, we have documentation on that. Yes, we have documentation on that.
Okay, well, with the letter that I got from Paul Dines did not say that.
We'll be happy to provide it.
Okay.
City Attorney.
I'd just like to point out that regardless of what happened at a meeting with two council members cannot form a contract on behalf of the city. It just simply cannot happen.
Thank you.
We know that.
So it was just simply a discussion. And I actually think use of the word oral contract is misleading on this slide. It's simply not possible to create an oral contract through a conversation with two council members. Only the full council can approve a contract, and it has to be clear what the terms are. Thank you.
Well, we should have came back and got it, make sure everything was documented. And in hindsight, that's where we should go. Is let's make sure we've got all the contracts in place, that everything is above board. We're not trying to hide anything.
I'm just pointing out that to the public who might be listening at home, that no contract was formed by any conversation with any council members outside of a public meeting.
You finished, council member?
No.
Okay. Okay. So I have a question because it's on those lines. Every year during the budget, the convention center management would come and give us a presentation, but no one seemed to mention, and I know that there's fault on the city side as well because it was never brought to the council. Nobody seemed to talk about the increase in the management fee during any of those presentations either, because the numbers that we did get were all rolled up, so we would have never known. And had not a couple of us not seen that slide in April, we still wouldn't have known what the management fee was. So I'm just asking you from a practical standpoint as business people, when you increase fees, you would need to get an amendment to a contract. I imagine you would know that. So I'm just wondering, did you believe that staff could automatically just increase the fee? I don't understand how you talk about transparency and openness, but it was never mentioned in terms of the increase in the fee for the last several years.
I might address that. I think part of it just happened to do with history and past practice as it relates to how we managed the budget and discussed with city finance department. And because there had never been discussion of agreement at any given time, you know, back when Steve was the CEO, he and I actually initially talked to Jennifer Smersino at the time, where you saw the increase go from 45,000 to 50, and asked for an increase basically because there had never been one. And at the table, it was just a discussion. There was no discussions at the time whether or not, okay, we never knew there was no agreement, if you will, that never existed, and that there was never understanding of where that came from. Just because, again, it had been around for so long.
No, I understand
Yeah, so,
all of that.
I just want to make it clear,
but
too,
I
that
don't think Jennifer was here during 14-15. I think it was Julio. Jennifer wasn't here.
Well,
when it was increased the first time.
Okay. Well, if it was Julio, that was the discussion. My apologies for making a mistake on the person. But that is just the way we had dealt with that process of any increases. And because nothing had ever been called out in the contract, and because it was an evergreen contract. So when this direction came to put the percentage in, however that may or may not have happened, it was the same discussions with the city staff at the time. Highlighted in red, this is the direction that was given. There was a discussion with city finance. It never came back to me as to say, no, shouldn't happen, can't happen, put into the budget book again. The following year, it came up again, and there was a discussion of whether or not there was an oral contract or if there was a contract of any kind. I said no, not to my knowledge, but I did ask the interim city manager at the time to suggest that they look into whether or not a written contract needs to be amended of any kind. And unfortunately, that was the last I personally heard of it. So I just wanted to clarify kind of how it got to be where it is as it relates to being put in the budget.
City Attorney, if the management fee was to be increased, should there have been a vote of the council to increase that? And what does that do to the fee if it was increased without proper authorization by the city council?
Well, it's given how this contract was written, I think the only place that it could have been increased would have been as a line item in a budget that was actually brought to the council's attention. I'm having trouble understanding exactly how I should answer the question of what does that do to the fee.
Well, I'm
I
wondering
think
if the fee needs to be paid back, or what was it paid to the convention, to the Chamber of Commerce without authorization?
there are arguments that would suggest that the fee might be recoverable, and
I'm not suggesting it, but I'm just asking.
No, it's a difficult question to answer in a public meeting like this.
Okay.
In terms of what would the city's remedies be for if they were to try to recover the fee at this point.
So I'm going to ask the city manager then, if we do not pay the management fee to the Chamber of Commerce in the future, does that affect the operations and management of the convention center and its current budget now?
Well, I think we need to talk with the members of the chamber to see if we don't issue a payment, what the results would be. And depending on their response, then to determine what our next steps would be to stabilize any service.
Okay, and so one of the things that, I'm wondering, when the management fee was increased without our knowledge, was there a list of additional services that were going to be provided by the chamber for that management fee?
No, and in fact, that's what the nature of a portion of our conversation was in April, is if there was an opportunity to understand the difference of what $45,000 value of a management fee provided the city versus the 140 plus amount. What's the incremental increase of service that the city would receive? So at this point, do we have any justification for increasing that management fee of additional services? Because I'm not seeing any. So I don't have any justification other than what has been presented tonight in the record, as well as the information that's been submitted, as well as notes from the budget process that carried it forward, as we've all already heard, in the manner of which it was carried forward. I don't have line items of this is a new outcome, this is a widget of outcome that constitute payment or that authorize issuance of public funds. It's the contract and the payment structure has just never been broken down in that manner.
When we looked at that, we used a CPI index of 3% and then a competitive analysis to come up with that pricing.
No, I understand, and the issue I'm having is that this was done without the council's knowledge or the public's knowledge. That's the whole issue that I'm having, that it was done without anyone's knowledge, and then the risk of the checks being written by the convention center without any city signatories or oversight. I have a huge issue with that as well, and luckily that has changed based upon us seeing this new fee in a presentation by our consultant. So it was changed, I think, the staff, it was changed pretty close to immediately after that.
I would recommend one area that I heard from the testimony this evening is to the extent that you consider a management fee and the structure for payment, much like we got our financial side in order and isolated the expenditures and monitored, the statement of the fee is put into the Chamber General Fund. The Chamber has a lot of activities under it, as it should. The management fee should be isolated and measured against what public value we get according to the contract. It should not be commingled with other services and put into a larger fund that isn't easily traceable. There's an issue there that I heard that could easily be remedied through an agreement, and needs a little bit tightening up if that is the manner of which, and they're nodding, if that's the manner of which how they're handling the funds.
Right, I mean, that's one thing we've already talked about as well, is the commingling of funds with the operations, because it's public funds cannot be used to assist a business lobbying organization or a political action committee as well. So that's another whole subject. I was trying to stick to just the management fee. That's another issue that needs to be dealt with, but just the management fee. Councilmember Mahan, you have another comment?
Yes, because my question is this. So the budget item was approved through no fault of the chamber, through no fault of this staff. This past council got a rolled up number, which included a management fee at an increased amount, although the council didn't by line item particularly know that, but certainly they could see the difference between one budget and another, an increase of over $80,000, and may have questioned it. However, putting all that aside, I don't think it does us any good to try to assign blame, because I don't think it's the chamber's fault. They presented their numbers to the staff. I don't think it's the staff's fault, because it wasn't under this current administration that these numbers came forward. But that number still exists in the budget. So what happens to that number, because we now know what it's for? I mean, it is a budgeted item. I think the chamber has a right to it. So how can we just say, no, we're not going to pay it? Because I think the city manager now is taking the proper steps to make sure that we can pay it in the lawful way. We have oversight now. I also want to clarify, and this is probably a question, because the contract says that there's going to be a revenue account set up that the chamber can use to pay its expenses. And I think the city manager did tell us that this was a general account, but not a general fund account. So, and now you do have the proper oversight in place. Is that not correct?
We don't have the proper oversight. I would recommend that we have a contract manager, just given the complexity of these agreements.
Yeah. But
what we do have is monitoring of the issuance of checks, which was not in place before. Meaning even the reports that were referred to as the documentation to support the checks, there was no oversight to review or audit of them. They just were noted and filed.
I understand that, and the motion on the floor includes doing an audit, so we can get that information, and I support that. My question is, though, the kind of account, because I don't want to confuse the revenue account or what you're calling a general account that was a zero account. You know, the chamber put money in, the convention center put money in and spent from that account, as opposed to a spending out of our general fund.
I guess I could ask Angie to come and explain, but I can explain it again. This was the general checking account of the city, which for which we issued checks. And as you know, we have a very complex fiscal environment, and it's significant. And the approach that was taken was a zero-based account to isolate the funds and to be able to put money in and take money out. But it is the city's checking account.
But the checks they wrote couldn't come from the Parks and Rec account, or they couldn't come from the library budget, or any other general fund operations. Is that right?
So the way it's set up is a zero balance account, which we call ZBA account for short. It's sort of, you have your general account and it's a sub account, and every night any expenditures or revenue is washed into the general account, the main account, the city's account. Yeah. On the side from the accounting side, then we record it in the convention center. So we have a fund set up for the convention center. So no, there would be no parks money or anything like that, but the general fund would subsidize if expenditures were above revenues.
That is a very key point, and it is, while the dollars would not come from the Parks and Rec funds, right, because we manage through our coding, we are floating funds at negative value. So if they have an entry for which they need us to take them back to zero, the dollars are fronted. And the problem with that is, to the extent that, and I'm not making any suggestions or drawing conclusions, I'm just speaking to the activity of what can occur in the fund. To the extent that it is negative, what our past practice would be is to take it back to zero by issuance of public funds. And the problem with that is it wasn't monitored. And I'm not, believe me, I am trying to be very careful with my terms here. I'm not making any suggestions, but that is a high-risk fiscal environment where no one on the city side, and again, I'm putting it all forward around the issues that are deficient in the city, but to the extent that it is a zero-based account that must be at zero, and there is a negative entry, and we're not monitoring it, that's a very high-risk environment, and all of our flags should be raised, and we're lucky that we're curing that and that we've created processes.
Sure. And if it's the opposite, if there's more funds in there than the chamber needs, then what happens to that CBA?
They're drawn down against.
So they're still washed into the main account, and then we would record it, and so then the convention center would have more revenue than expenditures. Their P&L would be higher, right? We maintain their P&L, but the city manager's correct. If there were more expenditures, there would be a negative.
Right, but at the end of the day, at the end of the fiscal year, that's all balanced out.
Correct.
So that,
well, and I want to be clear, it is balanced out, but it has the chart shows. I mean, put the TOT and all the other. The city has provided a subsidy. If we look at that 10-year chart, there has been an annual subsidy provided. I'm not making any suggestions of any foul play here. I'm just talking about the vulnerable environment that we created for the city.
And I agree that I think everyone here agrees this contract needs to be redone. And I even just compared it briefly to the tree vendors contracts. I mean, there's no conflict of interest provision, there's no ethics provision, there's no prevailing wage provision, there's no performance provision, there's no fair employment provision. There's none of the now routine provisions that we put in all of our city contracts. So I think that Councilmember Kolstad's suggestion is a good one, which is why I seconded his motion, that we refer this back to the city manager with directions to work on an interim contract that would include all of these provisions, include all of the issues, addressing the issues that we've talked about here tonight, and then also start an audit so that we can clearly see, going back the last few years, where the money's come from, where the money's gone, and get a clear picture of all of that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the public now. We have Mr. Suds Jain and then Ravinder Lal after that. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm actually surprised that anyone's surprised. For the last 3 years, I've objected to the fact that the convention center management was granted without competitive bidding. This has happened for the last 30 years. Had we done the competitive bidding, we might have discovered some of these issues. I was always promised by the city manager that this would happen, but it was always too late to go out for bids. It's just a basic free market principle, competition. The EMG consultant report shows that the convention center lost at least $10.32 million. This is the EMG report that you saw in February 27th. And what the city budget numbers show is that the convention center lost $2.317 million in 17-18, $1.597 million in 16-17, $2.098 million in 14-15. So we really do need an audit to figure out, because the chamber is saying that we actually made money, and here the actual budget that I see in the budget reports shows that we're losing money. And in addition to this, it seems like no money was put aside for rainy day funds. The HVAC system is just a mess. I mean, it's really literally held together with duct tape and urgently needs repairs. Then what I saw in January 30th of 2018, agenda item 13.B3, was that it came to the council to pay $468,000 for electrical work at the convention center. I don't know if that came out of general funds or out of convention funds, but it was on the council agenda, and the council approved paying $468,000 for that. I asked if it was general funds, and I was sort of told that it was general funds. In addition, there was $200K for painting. So we really need to figure out whether the convention center makes us money. Everyone says, well, there's these additional benefits of hotel taxes and everything, but we really need an audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lal? And then, okay.
Hi, my name is Ravinder Lal. I own the UPS store, Homestead and Kylie, and I'm also a member of the board. I'm the longest serving member of the board, so I have a pretty good memory of what was going on during all of that time. Most of you should remember during this 2015, 2016, we lost a mayor, we lost a city manager, we lost city staff, we lost our chamber CEO twice, we lost several board members, and things were looking pretty bleak with the RDA. It looked like we weren't able to book conventions for 9 months. We weren't able to hire people. Everything was frozen. So during that time, we as a board took a look at everything that we were doing. And what we were doing was running a convention center, spending all of our board time on running this convention center for the same amount that we were getting 30-something years ago. Now, we all know that $45,000 isn't enough to manage a convention center. Yes, Lisa does a fantastic job. Lisa is there because of our board, period. If you guys remember, we had Steve Van Dorn, then we had Roy Truitt, and now Lisa is the big chief over there. So, you know, if you guys are happy with her performance, that is directly related to the decisions that we've made as a board, period. Maybe the agreement wasn't done in proper fashion. You did have several members who took over our board, myself, Joe Szynski, Paul Dines. We don't have government experience. If it's okay, I'd like to go a little bit over. Thank you.
Go on, yes.
Have very little government experience. We're not politicians. I personally don't like being up here. However, we were trying to do what's best for the city at the time. We were the leadership during that time, and we were trying to do what's best for the city, period. We love this city. This city is our home. We do business here. We live here. The thing that bothers me the most is that the chamber isn't trying to do anything nefarious. We're not trying to go into public funds. I agree, there should be an audit. There should be controls from the city. There should be oversight, absolutely. Given that these things weren't done, well, you know what? We move forward and we do it the right way.
Thank you, Mr. Law.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miles Barber. And then after that, I don't have any other cards.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and fellow council people. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few minutes. I was one of the original members of the chamber when it was proposed that we build a convention center in Santa Clara. Lisa, you may remember that.
I don't remember that far back. I'm not that old.
That's right, I worked with your dad. Well, things have, at that time, we really had a great partnership with the city, and I hope that that restores itself over the next year. But in 1974, 75, up through 85, until we got the convention center open in 86, we really kind of relied on each other to support one another, and a lot of things were done on handshakes. And that was kind of how we operated the first few years. Now, we did have an agreement. Yes, it was in writing, the best we could do. But frankly, neither one of us have been really proactive in putting together an updated, modern, by the rule book today agreement. That probably needs to be done right away. And I think we would be totally supportive of that. However, now, there is one thing that I think that the city manager, particularly Ms. Santana, should pay attention to. And that is, if having been a sales manager for a number of years in my life, I'd be thrilled to death with any of my salespeople or sales organizations that had a 27% increase year over year for 9 years. I'd be kissing them. I'd be giving them a gold medal. I'd be probably sending them to Rome on a trip. We should be thanking this chamber for doing an incredible job under the circumstances they've gone through with the RDA issues, with the loss of personnel, with the turnover of city staff.
Thank you, Mr. Barber.
And they've done a hell of a job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone else would like to come forward, please come forward.
Thank you. Tino Silva. I disagree with Councilman Kolstadt's motion fundamentally, and I disagree with Councilman Mahan in that I think you have to understand how we got here. And I think that's important to understand how we got there so we don't make the same mistake twice. Shoving it under the rug and saying, let's just forget about what happened is exactly what everyone up here campaigned on in 2016, and that was transparency. And I feel that by simply saying, let's just move forward, you haven't lived up to what you promised. Second, I don't understand how a Chamber of Commerce with executives, people who have been in business for all these years, can work for 34 years without a contract? I don't know any business, small, medium, or large, that would ever do business without a contract. To me, that's just negligent. And yet, this is the organization that's running the convention center. That troubles me. What also troubles me is how the money is being used, because there is a PAC, and there are, during elections, the chamber is active in politics. So I'd like to know if that money that they are making from the convention center is being used towards their political endeavors. And finally, it's also troubling that volunteers are actually running this convention center. Nobody is held accountable. It's, well, he does it, she does it, he might do it, they might do it, Lisa does it, but she doesn't get paid. And I don't think that's the best way to run a convention center. And finally, to what Mr. Barber said, he said, well, we've turned a profit 27% year over year. But I'll mind you that you started in 2008 during the Great Recession. You started when the economy was darn near a depression. So I wouldn't applaud too loud the fact that you've increased from the Great Depression or the Great Recession to where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. This time it's deliberate. I'm planning to do it. I need to say that I'm on the board of the chamber, but that is not where I'm speaking from. I'm speaking personally and not representing the chamber and what I want to say. I've been listening, and there's a couple of things that strike me. One, I've been working with Nick trying to get a whole lot of documentation that exists in the chamber and up to date. Our bylaws, I think, come from the flood and haven't been updated since then. So there's a real lack of proper documentation about a lot of things. And but then the other thing that I was thinking is you have a fabulous new city manager. And your style, from everything that I've been observing and listening, is one of accountability, of one of keeping records straight, of one of having processes and systems in place. So I think both sides, if you will, are in the same boat. And that boat is we were sloppy, and now we can't afford to be sloppy anymore. And so I really think that we need to kind of calm down about it, let the emotions go away, and look at, you know, how can we clean up our acts? How do we get all the, you know, all the contracts in place, the documentation in place, everything that we need to do, but not in a pejorative, not in a blame game kind of a way. Let's just move forward positively. Ultimately, we all have the same goal in mind, which is this city.
Thank
My
you.
2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you, Arlen. Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Nick Kaspar, Director for the Santa Clara Chamber of Commerce. I'll be very brief here. I just wanted to address the fact of our PAC. The PAC is a separate entity of the Santa Clara Chamber of Commerce. I've only been here in my role for about 9 months now, and the PAC is a member of the chamber, and all actions that come out of that is paid for as if any other member was requesting those actions. So I really just want to address that they are a separate entity and one does not have influence over another one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public? Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I don't want to add any confusion, but I want to just express my story as a member of the Chamber of Commerce and a board member in 2014. I was invited to be on the board and help serve the community in terms of business and education, which is my background. And I have a fabulous business here in the city of Santa Clara, 25 years off-the-wall soccer. We've served the city of Santa Clara and its residents, and it's a great city. We've had great experiences here. My business experience was thought to be important, and I was invited onto the board. Upon entering the board, most of my time was spent deciding what kind of parking lot would best serve the convention center, whether we should have paid parking or some other facet of operating the the convention center. We lost our vision for several years with the RDA, and it was a big challenge. And there was a lot of brain power spent on what happens with the convention center. I do not disagree that we need to have proper documentation, that we need to have oversight, that we need to have a legitimate contract, and we need to have expectations from each other. We need to know what our roles and responsibility are and is and what will be. I feel my time with the chamber, I've grown to greatly respect the people that I work with. I also recognize that there is a value with the convention center being overseen by the chamber. I, for one, was not in favor of it because I felt we were spending far too much time on it and we lost our path. However, with the way that we've set things up now, I feel that we have been effective in what we do in terms of managing the chamber or the convention center, and that we are starting to move forward in managing business in a proper manner. So there are a lot of things that go beyond my time here that I could explain, but I sense you get the essence of what I'm trying to express, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Back to the council. There's a motion and a second on the floor. Councilmember Colstead, would you like to repeat your motion, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I would make a motion that hopefully addresses everyone's concern. Number one, that we initiate a forensic audit into the convention center financials and see how that reconciles with the management fee. And as a parallel item, I would move that we keep the convention center open and direct staff to craft an interim agreement. And I would leave it completely up to staff and the chamber board that meets to get a mutually beneficial agreement that benefits both parties. Could be a percent of the net, it could be a fixed fee, whatever they agree upon, and bring it back to us so that we can determine what happened with the books, what happened with the money, and plot a course going forward for the future.
All right. Councilmember Mahan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was
Are
just
you
going to
talking about the
clarify.
motion?
Yes. So does that leave, Councilmember Colstead, are you leaving open then whether or not there is a fee? You're totally asking for staff to do some negotiating and meeting with the chamber and then come back, and so all items are open?
I feel that that would be a good idea. I agree with you. In other words, if they craft some other way to recover their expenses, then there wouldn't be a fee. It could just be a percent of the net. I don't know what it would be.
Councilmember Mahan.
I just wanted to point out a couple of things. First of all, I've served on the Convention Center Committee, Council Committee, and we've learned through our consultant that having the Chamber of Commerce administer your convention center is one common model of convention centers throughout the city. There are other models, but that is certainly one common model of having of convention center administration, one that we have followed since 1984. I'd also like to point out that we do have a contract. It's an old contract, but it's still in effect. It's deficient now in our more recent times. It's deficient in what we expect to have in a city contract, but that's what we're directing the city manager to do, is to bring back an amended contract that's going to include all of the things that we normally include in our city contracts, as well as looking at the management fee. And as Councilmember Kolstad pointed out, everything's up for negotiation, and it will come back to the council for a decision. There has been a budgeted management fee every year, so it has come to council approval every year since the contract was conceived. It may have been in the last couple of years before this current administration, maybe not brought back correctly, but that's not the fault of the chamber, and I really want to make that clear. And it's not the fault of our current staff. I also want to make that very clear. An audit is a way to look back and make us accountable, hold the city accountable on its side, the chamber accountable on its side. So we're not trying to sweep anything under the rug. In fact, this motion anticipates that we will bring everything to light through an audit, much as we've done for the stadium and other issues confronting the city. So I think it's only fair that we do the audit. I don't think it's fair to use this as an opportunity to close down our convention center, because that's going to hurt a lot of people, not just the staff who works there now, but the conventions that we have lined up, the people who want to come to our city. I was just in San Diego, where they have a convention center connected to their old town, their gas lamp district, connected to their it's relatively new development, Seaport Village, where conventioners were out shopping and dancing and eating and drinking, connected to their stadium. That's the kind of synergy we should be looking at going forward, building around our convention center. So we shouldn't be taking steps to try to shut it down. We should be looking to take steps to make it more vibrant, to tie it into the related project, to get that kind of synergy going, because we were there from Wednesday to Monday, And every single day we were there, that convention center area was packed with people spending money, day and night. Families, old people, young people, just across the board. And I can't tell you how many of them had convention tags hanging around their neck. So that's the kind of thing we should be looking at, building our convention center. So this is an interim step to get things cleaned up, to move this thing forward. The audit will look to the past and get the clear picture. It's an interim contract, and we'll know when we know more, we may adopt a different model. We may find out things that need to be remedied, but that's why this motion should be supported, because as I say, it will solve the immediate problem, keep our convention center going, and find us the proper path going forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Kolstad, you had you're up, your lights on, or you asked to speak? Okay. Councilmember Davis.
Okay, so I kind of look at it this way. We don't have all the documentation, so that kind of bothers me. But they're willing to give us that information. So I would really like to, I don't want to support this motion here, have them refer this back to you. Not completely, I don't know how to make this work. I know that we'll have to amend the 1984 contract if that's what we choose to do, but I think I want more information from you and them so that we can get a grip on this, because to me, I still think there's a lot of unanswered questions. And I agree, there was definitely, this to me is like a perfect storm. So I just really feel that we need to refer it back to you all to figure out what we need to do. And I know that I've asked Angie in the past that when we got these reports from the convention center, I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me, because everything was rolled up. And I had asked the question, why is it this way? And the answer was, because we've always done it this way. So I think that we just have to really take a look at what's going on here. I don't want to play the blame game. I don't want to get into any kind of craziness here. But I really believe that if we don't look at all the docs and we don't look at how the funding is drawn down, if we don't make amendments to a contract that's been since 29 years, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, and also with that, I would really like to see what their projections are. If they are going to be paid a fee to run the convention center, what is it that they're going to do? What is their 5-year plan or 10-year plan? What is it that they're going to make this convention center more, let's just say, in that area, more lucrative? We have City Place going up, and that's gonna, I know that they work on compression with the TID, but at the same time, I'd really like more information and some unrolled information from some of these reports. So I won't support the motion that's on the floor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Davis here. You know, one of the problems I have is that in this contract that's from 1984, it states specifically that there are accounting procedures that are supposed to be followed, and it seems like there's a contract here that nobody wants to follow, or it hasn't been followed. There are no accounting procedures, and because of that, we don't have any numbers, and we can't figure out why, you know, decisions were made, and those numbers can't be justified. And I have a problem with that, because we're talking about city money being used, which, I mean, you might as well call it a gift of funds, because nobody can account for how it's being used, and that's not a good use of taxpayer money or city funds. The Chamber of Commerce, the Convention Center, excuse me, and the CVB, they operate independently of the Chamber, and frankly, the management fee doesn't go to either the Convention Center or the CVB. So eliminating that fee shouldn't impact them. And I think our staff should identify other ways to process payroll and other minor administrative tasks that they say they do. So I will not be supporting the motion either. I'd like to submit a substitute motion if the opportunity arises. Thank you.
Councilmember Mahan, you have additional comments?
Yes, because I don't think these, I don't think what the comments from Councilmember Watanabe or Councilmember Davis really are far from what Councilmember Kolstad intends. So perhaps the motion should be amended or substituted to say just that, to just refer this entire issue back to the city manager to gather that additional information from the chamber, which they've begun to provide, and then bring back to us the results of that information gathering. And I would just ask the council if they still want to go forward with an audit as part of the motion.
Can I ask the staff, don't we have auditing rights anyway in the contracts? City manager?
We do, and it's outlined in the agreement. I do want to raise the concern and the issue why this item is on the agenda tonight, and I'll back up to my opening comments. The study session created new information for the council, and we held several sessions in closed session. During that time, I authorized the payment of the management fee while the council was deliberating in closed session. As that discussion has closed up, I was very clear that I had no authority to issue additional management fee, both with the chamber in April, because of the absence of legitimate or legal documents, and I shared with the council that the item needed to bring forward. So I do need direction today as to what do I do tomorrow with issuing a fee or not. And that's what really got us out into the public session, in that while the matter was being deliberated in closed session, I was being transparent around issuing the payment. I don't have direction from the council in terms of whether to continue to issue it or not. So I do respect the interim agreements and the audits and all that. That will take time. But in terms of a monthly fee, I have no authority unless that is part of your motion this evening.
I think we understand that.
Okay.
You're looking for direction.
Okay. I want to know whether it's which way sometime as part of the motion.
I think we're going to try to get to that. Councilmember Mahan, do you have additional comments?
My question would be then, if there's no immediate interim contract giving you the authority to make pay the fee, what will happen to the convention center management?
Well, with the full disclosure of the current state of where we're at, if you direct me to issue the management fee, obviously the action has been taken with all of the messiness disclosed, and you know full well, issue the management fee, and I will do so. If there's any other action that you can take, and we've offered options for the council to consider for the corrective action, that will take some time to get into an amended agreement. But I did state as part of this that there is a legitimate that authorizes the city manager. I need to know how to issue public funds, which under the existing information, as we've discussed in closed session, I have no authority.
But my question is this: if there's no authorization from this council to allow you to issue the management fee, even on an interim basis, while you work all of this out, what happens to the management of the convention center?
That's, as I said earlier, we have to hear from the chamber. Will they continue to manage the convention center?
Maybe the question is what happens to the operations of the convention center?
Right.
No, what happens to the management of the convention center?
And I had said earlier that it's really a question for them. If they're hearing that there is no management fee, are they going to provide oversight, or do we need to come up with a plan B? I can't answer that question. It's not anything for me to answer. It's really for the chamber to answer.
Well, it seems to me we probably need the answer to that question, and I'm not going to put anyone in the position to come up here and answer it on the spot. Perhaps this item needs to be referred back to the city manager for that discussion and be brought back to us, along with corrective actions, along with an audit. I know it's in the contract, but I'm asking, the motion is asking specifically to start an audit, a forensic audit, which is not what's contemplated in the contract.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. So if a city manager, I know, I believe that you mentioned that you had issued a payment. Were we paying that, was the management fee being issued on an annual basis or a quarterly basis or a monthly basis? How was that being done?
The payment is made at the end of the month, and it's made on a monthly basis.
Okay, so that we've paid up through the, say, the end of April, say. I mean, so my thought would be, you know, since we were saying that all bets are off, you know, kind of we want to have a fully open negotiation, my suggestion would be that we suspend the payment of the management fee until we have more of this due diligence done. And then if we can come up with a workable proposal, then we could, you know, we can enter into a more fully fleshed out agreement. And if it's deemed that it's reasonable or we have an appropriate structure, then at that time, however we might choose to, you know, perhaps we needed to start developing a term sheet, you know, of what it is we want to do. But, you know, we still, obviously, we still even have other, you know, more baseline issues with the convention center. You know, we're not even still sure what we're going to do with that, or if it's, you know, what's going to happen with the property. So that would be, you know, in terms of the motion that Mr. Kolstad made, was to say that the payment would be suspended until such time that we can enter into an appropriate agreement.
Councilmember Davis?
So, City Manager, that was my question, because I thought in April you cut a check for $146,000 to the chamber. Is that correct, Andrew? Was that April 12th?
There's multiple payments. That the amount that you're referring to sounds more likely, and I think it was closer to 120-something thousand. Sounds more likely like the monthly CVB payment, the $1.5 million.
CVB,
That's what it sounds just by listening to the dollar value.
But it said Chamber of Commerce. It didn't say CVB.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was just my question. I wanted to.
Thank you. Councilmember Kolstad?
I agree with Councilmember O'Neill that we don't have to have a management fee. I'm confident that the city manager and her staff and the Chamber of Commerce can craft an agreement. You might call it salary, you may call it office supplies. In your daily entry journal, you may have different entries that you're requesting reimbursement for, that you don't call them management fees, and it's not a blanket item. I'm pretty comfortable that this staff and the chamber staff can come up with something that they can present to us that would be more acceptable than a management fee. I don't want to get hung up on nomenclature here. And I think if we have a two-pronged approach. One, we audit what has happened to determine if there is any mistakes that have been made. And the second is that we craft a scenario that will allow this convention center to continue to function. And I'm also not saying that 6 months or a year from now, this city council may decide they want a different model. Maybe they're going to want to put out an RFP and look for another management company. I don't know what you might do going forward. I'm just saying to solve this problem, at least temporarily, until we have more data. And if that requires an amendment to the motion to incorporate that, then I make those amendments.
City Attorney?
No, I just wanted to make clear that the current agreement requires the chamber to continue to manage the convention center. I mean, it's an obligation of the current agreement. And so I don't think, and the management fee is not spelled out in the contract, so I don't think not paying the management fee would trigger any obligation or any right by the chamber to say, therefore we can discontinue managing the convention center. So I think there's still an obligation for them to continue, and I don't think anyone has an interest in not continuing to operate the convention center. So I just wanted to make that clear from a legal standpoint.
Thank you. That's That's a good clarification, because we're not talking about the operations of the convention center, because the operations of the convention center, they're fully funded by the city and they operate on their own. The chamber provides a management oversight of the convention center, so I don't think this affects the convention center budget at all, since the funds for the management fee are not used for the operations of the convention center, at least that's what we're told. So right now, we are engaged in a process to determine the governance model for the convention center, and I really think we need to expedite that process, because we were talking about coming up with a new model, probably, as was mentioned, within the next 6 months to a year anyway. So, and we understand that employees may be concerned about the operations of the convention center, but the way I see it, it will continue to operate because the city does fund it, fully funds it, the operations. What's concerned me is that the management fee was increased dramatically in the last 2 years. In fact, the fees in the last 2 years were actually, in some cases, more than 3 times the fee that was paid, for the first 20 some odd years. So the way I look at it, we have overpaid these fees because I can't see any evidence of any additional services that we received for that more than tripling of the management fee. So there's no justification for using additional tax money for a management fee when there's no evidence of any, as I said, additional services to the city and the management of the convention center. So, and equally troubling is, that this happened without the disclosure to the city council or the public as to what was happening. So I agree about suspending the fee until, first of all, the chamber does provide all the information that our city manager has been asking for and our city attorney. First of all, that's at the very least, all that information needs to be provided so that we know, what's happening there. And suspending the fee, again, that was tripled over the past 2 years anyway. That should be prepayment for managing this convention center. And then, once we get all that and we have a chance to look at it, and whether there's commingling or self-dealing or any of the other issues that have come up, we want to make sure that it's completely transparent. I know there's very good members on this chamber board. There's no doubt. There's people that have wonderful intentions, want to make it profitable, want to make it, really do the right thing for the city. But I don't actually think we can move forward until we fix our end and the chamber fixes their end. And then we can hopefully move forward, because I think there are a lot of people that have very good intentions. And so I agree that the fee should be suspended until we get all the information, the financial information, the conflict of interest information, everything that we've been asking for, and then we take another look at it. But in the meantime, expediting the process of looking at our different governance models for the chamber. So I won't be supporting the motion. All right, so I'm not sure what the motion is actually. It's changed a few times. But Councilmember Kolstad, would you like to restate your motion?
I think it'd be better if I just withdrew the motion and see what you all come up with.
Okay. All right, Councilmember O'Neill.
Okay, so let me make a try at this. So I make a motion that we direct the city manager and the city attorney to begin a process of exploring a term sheet for a new agreement with the Chamber of Commerce for their management of the convention center, that we begin the process of executing a complete financial and performance audit of the chamber, and that the management fee be suspended until such time as we can enter into a new agreement.
Could you add the scope of services in there?
Well, so the contract will include a definition of a
Okay.
statement of work or
Thank you.
scope of services.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that? Lights on the motion? Please register your vote. And that passes on a 5-1. And we're going to take a 10-minute break. Thank you very much.
I want to
Oh,
mention
yes.
that with this action and the expenditures required for the audit, I will bring that back as part of the budget action on June 12th. So no action will be taken until the funding is in place.
Thank you. 10-minute break. Thank you.